I think I did my part.
Let's see.
You are live.
Let's see. I see that. I think the vertical one is live. Yeah, you do have a live. And now it is full. All right. So since that just started, sorry about the tech issue, guys. We are now live on both sides. So with that being said, I am Kat. My channel is Kat Not Williams. I like to look at cases, motions, docket updates, and really look for anything that looks like some funny business or craziness, prosecutorial misconduct, not too much else. Just like looking at the cases. Dana McLendon, Trial and Error Podcast, if you want to give your intro, and then we'll
Sure.
get into it.
My name is Dana McLendon. I'm a criminal defense lawyer practicing in Tennessee. I've been a lawyer since 1993, and I've handled cases from Mountain City to Memphis, rapes, robberies, murders, mayhem, you name it. So, um, seen a lot of stuff.
Well, glad to have you here. I also, since you're a practicing attorney in Tennessee, we've had some confusion. Typically when we hear the word general, we think of like the state or, the federal level attorney general. Can you just explain the nomenclature that you guys use over in Tennessee courts for what we would call a district attorney?
Sure. So all of the prosecutors work for the district attorney general. And under appropriate circumstances, we as criminal defense lawyers frequently refer to them as General Smith or General whatever their last name may be. It's just a courtesy.
Cool.
It's not
There you
obligatory.
go, you guys.
It's not obligatory. So sometimes they're
Well,
just Miss Smith.
Well, we know all about that. YSL trial watchers will remember when Brian Steele switched from calling opposing counsel attorney love and went to lawyer with a lowercase l love after some fallout. So,
Yeah, there's a
uh,
funny motion that happened in the county where I'm primarily located that some years ago, a lawyer demanded that he be called Captain Justice and that his client be referred to in court as that innocent man. That, yeah, it's pretty funny. I think you could probably Google that and find it, but
that is great.
yeah, the games lawyers play, right?
I love that. I always love the craziness. We've got plenty of craziness here, and I'm going to shrink us a little bit now that everybody's been acquainted. Give some space at the bottom here to pull up comments and questions. But guys, I think the most important thing about this trial is the location information, the phones, and the quick 411. Phone information was presented at the 2017 trial of Zachary Adams. Now that we're in the post-conviction petition phase, there's a lot of confusion because it seems like, in my opinion, and I think a lot of you will agree, the phone evidence clearly lays out an alibi, not just for Zachary Adams, but also his co-defendants. So on that issue alone, I think there's a question of why would he not get a retrial? That alone, let's give this man a retrial because I don't think the jury quite got it. But it's a lot to digest. And maybe the jury in 2017 felt that way. So, Dana, I'd like to just turn it over to you and let you go bananas with the map.
So the map that you're looking at is a map that was prepared by U.S. Marshal John Walker. This map has now, at last, been introduced as evidence in the post-conviction relief. And what John Walker was able to do is truly remarkable. We did a whole episode with John Walker on our podcast at the Trial and Error Podcast, and I took John Walker on this route as he explained to me how he created it. It's important to remember that when Holly was abducted in 2011, there was not a whole lot that you didn't have. Find My Friends, for example. In fact, I looked it up. Find My Friends debuted about 6 months after she disappeared. So you did not have the ability, particularly in rural West Tennessee with 2G network, to easily, precisely locate a phone. So what John Walker did, John Walker was a U.S. Marshal, and the other part of this story that's got to be understood is when Holly got abducted at 8 o'clock that morning, within a couple of hours, there were dozens of badges present, dozens, and it would soon become hundreds. They rolled in from everywhere immediately. John Walker got there a couple of days after this disappearance. He was essentially a manhunter. He'd been a U.S. Marshal for a long time, and his specialty was finding people that didn't want to be found. He had a number of techniques and methods, some of which he could discuss and some of which he couldn't, to find people that didn't want to be found. But one way he was able to do it frequently was through the use of cell phone technology. What he did here was he showed up and he got the cell phone data dumps from every cell phone in the area. I think it was a dozen or more cell phone towers from AT&T and all the other major carriers. And he went through all of that data, meaning literally every call, every text, everything that went from a phone to a tower and out. He went through all of that and painstakingly recreated the route that Holly's phone took from the moment of her abduction until her phone was apparently intentionally disabled by removal of the separation of the battery
The
from the
SIM
phone
card.
and or the SIM card. The SIM card and the phone were recovered later, not on this map, but nonetheless. So we have now what he did was astonishing. This was literally like working out a puzzle. He had 4 clones of Holly's phone and he had the data. So he knew, and when Holly disappeared, they started pinging her phone. And it turns out that pinging a phone is a very specific act. It's manually causing a tower to reach out and electronically touch a phone. So when we say ping, that means something specific to them that is different than what we frequently say.
Everyday language.
Yeah, everyday language. Pinging meant literally telling the tower, touch that phone, and then return that data to the tower so we can know. So what John Walker did was took all this data and reconstructed the route of her phone by taking 4 identical clones to her phone and the data that he had and driving these remote roads. And what would happen was he would have the data and the 4 clones. And when the data and the phones started to literally diverge from one another, he knew he wasn't on the right road. So he would back up, start again, try again. And through a process of trial and error that took him weeks, he was able to reconstruct the route that Holly's phone took in an hour and a half after her disappearance. And this is the map that he came up with. If you see, you'll notice that almost immediately upon Holly's disappearance, they knew she'd been walked off the property with an unknown third-party male. So, needless to say,
and that would be from Brother Clint is at the home.
Correct.
His firsthand observation is he sees the man and Holly. But
Correct.
then they also, don't they do some work with the search dogs, and the dogs stop once they get through a wooded area and get to a road?
Yeah, and depending upon who you ask and which dog team it was and everything else, some of these law enforcement officers are kind of like, I never believed anything the dogs did, and some of them are like, oh no, these are highly trained dogs, what have you. But yeah, acting primarily, especially in the immediate aftermath of Holly's disappearance, they started. They realized that Holly had been removed from the property by a male Caucasian, about 5'10", 6 feet, barrel chested, skinny legs, camouflage clothes, etc. Where Holly's family lived at that time, I've been there. I took John Walker there. It's remote. It's literally a gravel road. It is.
We're down here at this point, chat.
It's
a little cut off.
Correct. Yeah, it's remote. You would never drive by this home accidentally or on your way somewhere else. Almost never. So
well, how far away? The nearest mile was like a quarter mile away too, right? It wasn't like side by side neighbor.
Yeah, the nearest home was far enough to drive to, not not walk over. I mean, you could, but
Ugh.
so immediately they have nothing other than Clint's eyewitness account of Holly essentially being led into the wood line towards a logging road behind their home, and then she vanishes. They have no car. They have no other description. They have no apparent motive other than kidnapping. They know next to nothing. No one has a description of the vehicle that's left with her. They don't know which direction it's going. Nothing. So this map doesn't exist until months later. Now, if you look at the map, you'll see that the Holly's phone travels. And again, I took John Walker. He took me on this route, and I was astonished when I did this with him that I did this with him earlier this year. So 14 years after the investigation, 14 years after he showed up on the scene, and he knew it like yesterday. And he sat in my car and he was like, left turn, right turn, left turn. He knew this route.
He did it with multiple devices to make sure, right? He didn't just one and done it.
No,
He
no,
tried
no.
to
This took
replicate.
this took weeks of trial and error because he would take the phones and go out and drive, and when the data was no longer consistent with the location of the phones that he was getting at the time, he knew he'd gone on the wrong road. So until he had every piece of data from these tower downloads lined up with an actual route and a timeline, he knew he wasn't right. It took him a long time to reconstruct this map. And when he got it reconstructed, Holly'd been gone for weeks or months. But it's interesting that 14 years later, John Walker's map, a couple of things are true. First of all, no one has been able to dispute credibly the accuracy of this map. Second of all, to not to bury the lead, but if you look in the left, that left dot that says in area for 30 minutes.
Over here.
Yeah. That dot is virtually on top of where Holly's remains were recovered 3.5 years later. And he knew it. He said, she'll be here. And he was right. And I took Marshall Walker to the location where her remains were recovered. He'd never been there because by the time they recovered her remains, he'd been run off from the investigation. And it was a surreal and human moment for him because he felt a deep sense of unfinished business. And he made the remark to me at the scene that, if if people had just believed this, they might have recovered her much faster. And if they'd recovered her much faster, she'd have been just as dead. But
Better evidence.
the crime scene might have yielded evidence that would have been useful instead of the scattered bones and personal effects that were later recovered. There was no DNA or hair or blood or anything else available at the scene 3.5 years later. But John Walker knew where she should be. In fact, he went out there and tried to find her on his own, but the area where she was recovered is vast and rugged and wooded and unpopulated. And,
Yeah, there's no like vantage point where you can see like, hey, something is sticking up from the terrain or looking unusual because there's just so much brush covering it.
Yeah, brush, leaves, underbrush, undergrowth, just all kinds of problems with searching it. And, they searched so many other places and just never, they couldn't quite, so
And
they
honestly,
couldn't
in a
quite,
bubble,
yeah,
in a
now
bubble with these routes, it's like, this is the abduction of Holly. And again, in the early stages, they haven't mapped out this precision. They don't have this precision.
Yeah,
And
now I will say that had they known how to act on it, and I think some of this was a failure of the technology was slightly ahead of the men on the scene. When they were pinging her phone, it is possible that they might have had actionable real-time intelligence as to the location of her phone.
Can you explain? I mean, I think there's a good example of I forget his name, that made the request, the first responding officer that ended up calling AT&T. I'm a bit shocked that in training, there wouldn't be training to, hey, if someone's missing and you're calling in to do these pings, request the most frequent ping possible. And I don't know if like a 5-minute window versus a 15-minute window would have stopped the abduction, but what if it could have?
Yeah, I don't think it would have stopped the abduction. To me, between what the FBI profiler said and this map, and some of the inferences and assumptions that I've drawn, having become familiar with this case, I think it's likely Holly was dead within an hour. I think it's likely that she was taken directly to that location where it says her phone stopped for 30 minutes. She did not leave there. She did not survive that location, and her body was there probably the whole time. That said, uh, they almost, it's likely that had they understood what they had, they might have been able to draw a net, draw a sharper focus on where to look, when to look, and so on. Now, just to complete the rest of this map, it's my theory, because I haven't come up with a better one, that Holly's phone is separated from Holly at that location at about 9, whatever it is, 8:56 a.m., where you see Holly's remains, location of Holly's remains. My
So this
belief
this
is
chat bubble, but this dot over here.
correct. Yeah. My belief is that Holly's phone left the scene with her assailant, and her remains stayed there with a handful of personal effects. That the
And
assailant then returned.
that means any, oh, somebody lives over here is not such a convincing argument anymore.
Right. So I think, well, if you want to, let me finish the map and then I'll tell you at least a theory that makes sense to me.
Okay.
So Holly's phone then moves in the direction that you see in the blue line until eventually being turned off, separated from its battery or SIM card at 9:25 a.m. at what we call Gooch Creek.
What we call Gooch Creek, that's what it is.
Yeah, well, inside the podcast and the courtroom, the Gooch Creek Bridge. This is the location where John Walker, within days, had, because they had this ping location. He didn't have the route drawn out, but they had this ping location. And Holly's remains, I'm sorry, Holly's phone goes dead and dark here forever at Gooch Creek. Knowing that, John Walker went to that location and searched the area again and turned up some additional pieces of Holly's personal property, including a notebook that had washed down the stream there. I think he said 75 yards or something. So John Walker was on this route.
75 from the road.
What's that?
75 feet from the road.
Yeah, something like that. They had already pulled a lunchbox out of a. I think by then they had pulled the lunchbox out of the tree nearby. Along the way, too, between where her remains were found and this Gooch Creek Road or Gooch Creek Bridge, you'll see that there are other places where it's not on this map, but for example, this route goes past Victor Dinsmore's home, Shane Austin's trailer. It also is on this route that other pieces of Holly's personal property are recovered. I think there's a receipt, a couple other things that are found on this route. To me, a theory that works, and I've run through these things countless times, I think it's entirely possible that what happened here is that Holly's assailant kidnapped her and took her to a location where, in my opinion, they intended to stay for a while. I think it's entirely possible that what happened here was that that assailant did not know
Yes.
immediately that Clint Bobo had seen him
They had to call an audible.
until the assailant's burner phone went off and he was informed that Holly's brother had seen them and that the entire world was now looking for Holly. This accelerated the events of the day, tragically. I say tragically, this probably accelerated the events of the day and maybe even led to Holly's murder. And then everything that happened after that for the next couple of hours was a scramble to stay ahead of the inevitable uh, police inquiry. And so if you look at from Holly's home to where her remains are found, there is no evidence recovered on that route, as far as I know. There's no personal property lost or discarded along that route.
And
But
as
once the
a backseat juror, let me say that putting myself in a bubble watching the trial, that would not have been clear to me.
right,
And my impression was stuff
well,
scattered all over. They know exactly where everything was. It was all over the place. It was in front
well,
of
keep in mind
the
that this map never made
co-defendant's
it in.
trailer.
This map never
Yep.
made it into evidence for the jury at all. So I'm not surprised if a juror was confused about where certain things were found. What a juror or a person watching that trial probably would have come away with was a bunch of Holly stuff was at the end of Shane's driveway. Well, fine. That is true, but incomplete. A little bit of Holly's things were found, several things of Holly's were found along this route until it terminates at Gooch Creek. Interestingly enough, if you pull up the Gooch Creek location and then ask it how to get from there to Terry Britt's house, it's a
Well,
few minutes and a few miles. And it's plausible that if Terry Britt was the assailant, that he got to Gooch Creek and realized he had a bunch of her stuff left in his vehicle and he needed rid of it. And this phone was a problem. And so he paused there because John Walker told me, if you drive this route, the first place that you get that's really sort of away from windows, houses, away from driveways, away from passersby, is this Gooch Creek Bridge. And if you wanted rid of something and you hoped you could, use a creek or a river to get rid of it, this is the only place. So I think it's about 3.5 miles from Gooch Creek Bridge back to Terry Britt's house.
yeah, so I've got my microphone blocking the scale, so I didn't really see the scale. So what we have on screen right now was put together by DB, for real, maybe it's just FRFR in the chat. Incredible, incredible resource. So it is not an exhibit. It is not like official evidence in the trial. But for what I think is a really powerful exercise, if you want to go and explore some of the things that we're hearing Dana describe, and we can move around this map on screen if you
Sure.
want to point.
I see something I want to, there's, just looking at this looks great. The one thing I would notice is the trial testimony and even the interviews that suggested that there'd been a rape at a barn, the Hickerson, the corn crib rape. Holly's phone never stops there. Oh, let me add this too. John Walker also did the same analysis, not as far as routes go, but as far as where were the phones. Neither Holly's phone is never co-located with Zach, Dylan, Shane, or Jason. So we never have Holly's phone in the same place as any of the four eventual defendants or alleged perpetrators. There is no opportunity, according to Holly's phone, to pause and have a rape at the Hickerson barn. And I think only for a minute or two is Holly's phone even on the same tower as any of the others. But the other phones regularly pinged on and off those towers because they were like their home tower anyway. So if you
Yep.
just believe the phones, then I think it's inevitable that you have to conclude that these four fellas somehow contrived that their phones would have would be somewhere besides with Holly's phone in order to create the illusion that they were not with her, that none of them were with her. That seems very far fetched to me, that the four of them could pull that off uh,
And
in the way that the phone data shows.
for anyone that hasn't like gotten to see the 2017 trial, the state was relying half the time when it seemed to suit what the state wanted to say, assuming that each of the defendants, the co-defendants, had their own device on them at the time when it would be relevant and they wanted them to have their own device on it. But let there come a question where something doesn't add up, then they want to lean on that suggestion that, well, that would only be true if they had it only tells you where the device is, right? It doesn't tell
Right.
you where the
Well,
person is, which is true. That is true, but
right. Well, yes. The other interesting thing too is that uh, not only do none of the phones co-locate, the phones also don't go where Jason Autry said they went, in terms of the effort to dispose of the body. That story was demonstrably a lie. You also have the fact that the phone the phone and the SIM card were later recovered on the same route that a truck very much like Terry Britt's was seen that morning on a camera. So if in fact Terry Britt is the assailant and disabled the phone and and got rid of it later the same way that I suspect some of these personal items were gotten rid of, it, that is just thrown out the window, then um, then it is possible that the evidence is consistent with Terry Britt having had that phone and flinging it out the window as he was on his way to create an alibi.
so I wanted to flip back. This might be a good time. One of my topics of discussion tonight is, of course, going to be Terry Britt and or the Brits. If you want to segue into that, that might be a time. The first question I was going to ask to get us into the Brits was going to be about the relevance of Joe's video. and here, let me frame this for the chat. So, when this is happening, they have no idea who to look at. They pull up a map of sex offenders. They're trying to go and speak to all the sex offenders. They're getting community tips. They have volunteer citizens that probably mean well, but they're walking all over these areas. So who knows if someone's going to leave their trash behind? And, oh, is this something that could have belonged to Holly? There were news reports about someone finding duct tape with a piece of hair on it, that I don't think we're going to hear about strands of hair, guys. But I don't think this particular piece of duct tape found in the woods had any relation to this case. But it was a breaking news story.
I've had the pleasure to watch a number of hours of your live streaming, but just in case it's never been said, hear this. There is no physical evidence of any kind that connects Jason, Shane, Zach, or Dylan to the disappearance or murder of Holly Bobo, period, end of story. None. Zero.
And
no
as far
hair,
as an
blood,
investigation,
DNA, nothing.
How did they even know? The question would be like, who targeted Holly Bobo? Why was Holly Bobo targeted? Did she know them? Now, there's discussion that Natalie, cousin, knew Zach. But as far as Holly, it's a bit shaky until we get suddenly Dylan Adams, the brother of Zach, placing Holly Bobo at Zach Adams' home a few days before the abduction.
Well, let me tell you what that there is no residue of Holly Bobo at Zach Adams' home when the police went there and tore it apart, including pulling up floorboard, including cutting couches apart, including taking a couch with them to the lab, including, well, within 10 days of Holly's disappearance, Zach had consented to at least a cursory search of his property. 10 days after Holly disappeared, the police came to Zach's home and asked him some questions. And he said that, sure, I'll tell you what I did, where I was, and whatnot. Um, and they looked through his house. I think they went under in his crawl space. There was nothing there for them to look further at. Later, when Dylan provided this ridiculous so-called confession, they went back and tore the place apart. And I've been to Zach's home as it exists, as it was left by the TBI after that search. They literally cut up two huge sections of flooring under the premise that Holly had been raped to the point that she was bloody in that spot, and they came up with nothing. No,
And
there is no residue of Holly Bobo in a vehicle or a home connected to any defendant in this case.
but what the jury heard is a guy with binoculars that was put out in the woods as a civilian to keep watch on Zachary Adams sees Zachary Adams vacuuming out the back of his truck.
Yeah, well, Zach's testified at the post-conviction relief that he kept his truck neat. I mean, I hope that if I go vacuum my vehicle tomorrow, no one thinks I've committed a murder, even if there's been one committed nearby.
And the news was telling people that law enforcement was asking the community to be on the lookout for people that washed or cleaned their car recently. So it was something that's when you hear stuff like that, you're going to recognize it more.
Yeah.
You think of red cars, you see more red cars drive by. So
let me jump back to Joe's video.
Yes, I have a little slide with nothing except words. You can say anything you want.
So Joe's video in West Tennessee in 2011, people were still renting VHS tapes and whatever you would literally people. I don't know that anyone does that anymore, but at the time, Joe's video was a place where people would go and rent videos. It also had suntan beds in the back. And Joe's video was a place that Janet Britt worked. Janet Britt being Terry Britt's wife. She also worked, I believe it's either next door or one door down at the newspaper.
Well, let's pause. Terry Britt is a registered sex offender.
Has been for many years.
Yeah, we should have laid all that out. Oops, my bad. So Terry Britt isn't supposed to have phones that the state doesn't know about.
He did.
Like, you got to change your address. You're supposed to let them know. But he has these phones, and he gets caught in his testimony about this. Like,
Terry Britt is, he is as bad a liar as one might ever see. He doesn't, there are several times during his testimony at the trial of this matter. I don't even know where to start. We'll come back to Terry Britt. Let me say this as a prelude to opening the story about Terry Britt, okay? There are certain things in this case against Zach Adams that in 33 years of practicing law, not only have I never personally seen in one of my cases, I've never heard about it happening, ever. Here's a couple of them. Number one.
Pat's going to love it. I know it.
Number one, the defense called the three of the senior law enforcement officers on the investigative team starting on the day she was kidnapped, and who were on that case for months and months, and who all believed that Terry Britt was the appropriate suspect and that given the time and resources, they would get him. That is John Walker, Terry Dicus, and Art Viveros, an FBI agent, a TBI agent, a U.S. Marshal. The man who made the map we were looking at a minute ago, then and now believes Terry Britt is responsible. I have never seen a defense team call 3 law enforcement officers from the original investigation. You'll see law enforcement officers brought in as experts to second guess the investigation that other people did. These are the men who were doing it. Right. They were the people who were doing it. That's number one. I've never seen that happen. Number two, knowing that the defense was likely to advance the theory that the wrong guy was on trial and that the right guy is that guy over there, Terry Britt, Jennifer Nichols called a serial rapist kidnapping rapist, a violent sex offender who had begun kidnapping and raping women in 1977, and who, as far as I can tell, has only stopped while he was incarcerated. Jennifer Nichols put that man on the stand and not only vouched for his innocence, she facilitated him mocking the men who thought he did it. Now,
Jennifer Nichols was the trial prosecutor.
Jennifer Nichols was the trial
You guys
prosecutor.
may have seen me reference when I compare and say I think this is worse than what we saw with Fulton County and the YSL prosecution team. She is now a judge. She is now a judge.
She is now a judge in Gallatin, Tennessee, she was appointed to a seat by the governor, and she is running to keep that seat.
Oh.
So, back to Terry Britt.
And he's out right now. He's free right now.
Yep, that's correct. So Terry Britt is a local. When the police all got to the Bobo driveway and realized they had nothing, they had Clint Bobo. Frankly, from that moment in time, people doubted Clint Bobo. There were law enforcement officers on that scene who thought Clint Bobo is lying to us. This makes no sense at all. Is he as bad as Jennifer Nichols or as indignant? I'm not sure that I hope they're not talking about me, but perhaps they are.
Oh, no, not you.
Oh, okay.
I think it was Terry Britt question.
Oh, yeah. When you watch Terry Britt testify, you can see the contempt he has for Jennifer Thompson. You can see it. So when the law enforcement community converges in huge numbers on the Bobo property that morning, the only thing they have is what Clint Bobo tells them. And there were law enforcement officers there who did not believe Clint Bobo's story and thought he's lying. He's covering up. This makes no sense. Now they were putting that through, law enforcement mentality filter, because to them it made no sense that you would watch your sister kidnapped and not do something more than he did. Nonetheless, eventually Clint Bobo is interrogated over and over and over again, and eventually is cleared. But they didn't have anything to go on. So quite rightly, I think they started with a couple of things. Number one, if a person vanishes into thin air, you should rule out everyone in the family. You should suspect everyone in the family immediately.
I always assume that the family members are going to be the suspects, the prime suspects.
Correct. They should be the family and neighbors and acquaintances. You work from the inside out, right? The other thing that they did, and I think quite rightly, was they immediately started fanning out to canvass all known sex offenders and say, "Where you been today?" That's how they rolled up on Terry Britt first. And by that time, I think, I'm working from memory, but I believe
they're saying they saw the tub but it was still in the driveway. They have this leaking tub. So the Brits come up with the story, and you'll get into the receipt. But we heard that by the time they get there, there's a tub sitting in the driveway.
Well, let's start with this. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's don't forget this. Janet Britt is sort of general manager and central person in the local newspaper in Parsons, Tennessee.
Can you do a little more background, go back further and tell us more about who Janet Britt is?
Ooh, okay. Sure. So Janet Britt Terry Britt was not her first husband. I'm not even sure.
Janet Britt was not his first wife.
Oh, no.
It's like 7 marriages, 6 wives for Terry Britt, and
it's a bunch. But
here's what's for Janet.
Yeah, here's what's curious. One of a prior husband of Janet Britt is a man named Ed Martin. Ed Martin and Janet Britt lived in a trailer that we talked about being 3.5 miles from where Holly Bobo's phone went dead. That was where Janet and Ed lived And to this day, the name Martin is rusting on the mailbox. So Janet and Ed lived together as husband and wife, and at the time, he was a Decatur County Sheriff's officer. He was a sworn law enforcement officer until he is snared in a in a crime where he is videotaping the sexual assault of teenage girls that are in foster care in the trailer that he shares with Janet Martin,
Gross.
and he is sent to prison for this. So he goes from deputy sheriff to convicted sexual assault on girls, apparently with videotape evidence. Janet somehow escapes unscathed from this. I don't know how. It is apparent that when visiting Ed Martin in prison, Janet meets Terry Britt. And when Terry Britt is released, Terry Britt, then a convicted sex offender, violent sex offender, moves right into the same trailer with Janet Britt. So she leaves one husband in prison who's there for sexually assaulting girls and fills his spot with Terry Britt, who by then is already, for many years, a violent sex offender. And so that is the state of affairs at the time that Holly Bobo is kidnapped. But wait,
When we say
there's
affairs,
more.
usually it's just like, oh, it's a little messy, but here it's like affairs with all capital letters.
Yeah, now Ed Martin eventually gets out of prison for that bid and moves in down the street from his former home with Janet and who is now married and living with Terry Britt. So whatever. Now here's what happens. Well, I don't want to say next, but this is also true. In 2008, a woman named Tequila Jones is kidnapped. I believe she was kidnapped out of Jackson, West Tennessee, the area. And her assailants are Terry Britt and Janet Britt. They snatch her up, get her in a van, and kidnap her. Together. Oh yes, together. If you read Terry Dykes's book, Terry Dykes being the lead TBI agent who was forced off this case.
Can you tell him to restock that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll try. If you read Terry Dykes's book, oh boy, I'm so sorry. He hates that. If you read Terry Dykes's book, he will tell you that Terry Britt has a history of using women as lures, as accomplices in his kidnapping and rape. So in 2008, Tequila Jones is kidnapped from public and eventually escapes, is released, whatever. She gets out and she makes this report, and Terry Britt is charged. Now again, Janet escapes liability. Terry Britt is charged with the kidnap and attempted rape or sexual assault of Tequila Jones in 2008. At a moment in time that Tequila Jones is supposed to come testify to make this case continue on against Terry Britt, she is in jail in the custody of a sheriff in West Tennessee. She's not brought to court to testify against Terry Britt, and Terry Britt's charges are dropped. 3 years later,
because they say that they can't locate.
Failure to prosecute.
So we gotta connect that dot here.
Right.
They're not prosecuting the victim, which would be the complaining witness. Really,
they're not prosecuting.
Is unavailable
Terry Britt because
by their own fault.
Because they don't bring a woman that they have in hand to court to testify. So the Tequila Jones case is dismissed, dropped, and languishing, never to be heard from again, until Holly Bobo is kidnapped in 2011, and every badge within 150 miles shows up and starts saying, but wait, what's going on here? Art Vivros, an FBI agent, is going through things and he says, wait a minute, this convicted sex offender with a bad alibi, why did this Tequila Jones case against him get dropped? Well, there isn't a good answer. Guess what happens? Terry Britt pleads guilty and goes to prison for the abduction of Tequila Jones in 2008. And it is, in fact, when Terry Britt is presented to the jury in the Zach Adams case, he is wearing the prison uniform while serving the sentence for the abduction and attempted sexual assault of Tequila Jones that he committed in 2008. So, I mean, at a minimum, one reason that the district attorney and TBI might not have been thrilled about prosecuting Terry Britt is that if they had prosecuted Terry Britt for the disappearance of Holly Bobo,
They'd have
they
to
would have
answer
had to
why he was out in the
explain
first
why he
place.
wasn't in prison in the first place for yet another abduction and sexual assault. That would have been embarrassing and potentially career-ending for some.
And that's so much worse than actually getting it right.
Yeah, let me add this little anecdote. And when I tell these things to people, number one, I think it's a little bit like reading Anna Karenina. You can't keep up with all the characters, right? You have, the names and the events just keep coming, and you're like, I don't even know who's who anymore. And then, even if you could keep up with the names, you start thinking because I remember this happening to me. I remember hearing these things and going, no, that's not possible. Nothing like that happened, right? The DA who had Tequila Jones in a jail under charges is the same DA who did not prosecute a man named Jack Fowler, who was a sheriff in West Tennessee, in the county where Terry Britt went to jail frequently. That sheriff, Jack Fowler, later pled guilty to raping inmates in his jail and went to prison. So the DA who could have and didn't prosecute Jack Fowler is the same DA who could have and didn't bring Tequila Jones to court to prosecute Terry Britt, who'd been in and out of Jack Fowler's jail more than once.
So again, it's like sometimes it's a question of incompetence. Sometimes it's a question of is it incompetence, or is there something more nefarious that we?
Well, the evidence.
The more comforting answer would be incompetence. That would be more comfortable. That'd be easier to digest. But
yeah, so and I should add. Let me just say this real quick, okay? Everything I know about this case, I know about this case for one reason and one reason only. And that's Dr. Katie Spirko, who invited me. Huh? The goat? Yeah. Dr. Spirko invited me to assist her in this case when they hit her with a subpoena. And the next thing I knew, I was hosting a podcast with her. So everything I know, everything I've learned about this case, really comes from and through her. And I got to the point where she would start telling me something about this case, and I was just like, at first I was like, nah, that's not what happened. You're not a lawyer. You don't understand. That couldn't happen. That all those things wouldn't have happened that way, and over and over and over again. And I finally got to the point where I was just like, okay, go ahead, tell me. But back to Jack Fowler and Terry Britt. The allegations against Jack Fowler when he was the sheriff charged with raping his inmates was that he used Terry Britt as a finder, a lure, and an accomplice to get a hold of young men that he would rape. Now, is there a connection between Terry Britt being charged with Tequila Jones' crime, the crime against Tequila Jones, and then not brought to court in the same melee of people that I don't want I'm not going to necessarily say protected Jack Fowler, but didn't get after him because it was left to the federal authorities to indict and prosecute Jack Fowler. So connection, I don't know. Coincidence, possibly. Fact, absolutely a fact. Terry Britt was not prosecuted timely for the abduction and the sexual assault of Tequila Jones because Tequila Jones was in a jail charged with a crime. And the prosecutor in that crime was the same prosecutor who didn't prosecute Jack Fowler.
And that's problematic even if Holly Bobo was alive and never abducted, right?
No,
That's
yeah,
like a problem even with the overlap. It's
right,
just like how do we get there?
That's a failure that should never happen. It is also a failure that in this case, if I'm right about Terry Britt, there's a straight line from Tequila Jones not being brought to jail and Terry Britt allegedly abducting and murdering Holly Bobo.
Well, then that gets us, if we go back to, I'm going to flick to this real quick, to April 13th of 2011, the day of the abduction. The theory that, we panic, we shoot and kill Holly Bobo, and we drive, we realize we have these belongings. Terry Britt's road is suspiciously close to this area. We pull up to this driveway, and we get to what this alibi story that we put together.
Oh yeah.
And there's so many layers here. So this gets us Janet Britt. She is now working.
Janet Britt goes, according to a witness at the newspaper.
She works at this newspaper.
Is at the local newspaper office that morning. And this witness says, until Terry Britt called her and told her, you're leaving work. He rolls up, he grabs her up, and off they go. On the biggest news day in the history of that newspaper, the general manager and central actor in a tiny little newspaper office decides to go buy a tub. And so
that's the story, guys. We're not just like making this up.
Now the reason that we know that they went to buy a tub is that that's what they told the police when the police arrived hours later and found them unloading a tub from their truck. And also, I don't know about you, Kat, but I mean, I know that if I buy a $200 salvage tub, you know what I do with that receipt? I put it in my safe.
With a safe for a drink purchase?
Yeah. So when the police said, hey, you went and bought a tub? And they were like, yeah, hold on. Let me go to my safe and get the receipt. So they go to the safe and pull out this receipt. And when Terry Dicus took that receipt back to the store from whence it allegedly came, the people at the store said, that's not a receipt we would ever create. We didn't make that receipt.
You got to think of those receipt papers like the carbon copy, right? Where there's the pink and yellow slip underneath, and you impress with the carbon gets impressed as you sign the top sheet. So there should be 3 copies if it was truly signed then and there.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly all the details that made that receipt not familiar to the store that supposedly issued it, but they told Terry Dicus no such thing. So Terry Dicus quickly has Terry Britt's alibi collapse quickly. Now, keep in mind too that the way Terry Dicus tells this story is Holly is kidnapped at about 8 a.m. and we believe she's dead by about 9:30. We don't care where anyone is except between 8 a.m. and 9:30.
So this part of the pathway, this left spoke.
That's right.
Yeah, so, and I think that's critical because you're calling someone that works at a news station to leave work because of a tub.
Yeah. Now, I said this out loud to somebody one time and they were like, oh, wow. When they later went with search warrants
they still didn't install the tub
to the Britts' home. I think the tub had been installed, but they found a few things that were curious, and you had one of them pulled up on your screen a minute ago.
Yeah. Speaking of working at a newspaper,
Right.
and let's preface the question here. It's we have state wants to prosecute Zachary Adams, and he doesn't really become the target. He doesn't get solidified as a target until 2014. But the theory up until this point was, well, Terry Britt, he says he didn't know Holly. He says he didn't know Holly. And why would he go after Holly if he didn't know her?
Well,
Well,
according to Natalie, Terry Britt was stalking Natalie and or Holly. According to Natalie, Terry Britt creeped them out at a Dollar General a few months before the abduction. According to other women, Terry Britt was stalking them, one of whom was a deputy sheriff's wife. And so, according to when Terry Dicus started getting into Terry Britt, they found a number of women who said Terry Britt was stalking them. One of them walked in to Terry Dicus's office and started telling him about this this stalking. And Dicus said something to her like, "Well, what do you know about this man?" She said, "I know his name. It's Terry Britt." Natalie Bobo apparently told Karen Bobo, Holly's mother, that they had a nickname for Terry Britt, Chester the Molester.
Yeah, I mean,
When
not really much of a way to confuse the intent of a nickname like that.
Yeah, in February of 2011, Terry Britt is in fact at a Dollar General in Decatur County in
No,
a
this is
way that
important. Let's repeat the
corroborates
date.
February of 2011, about 60 days
Abduction
before
is
Holly
April.
That's right. Natalie has told the police that this incident occurred where he creeped him out and he stalked him and followed him around at the Dollar General. And in fact, Terry Britt's financial records demonstrate that he was in fact at that Dollar General in a way that was consistent with Natalie Bobo's allegations. But when they searched Terry Britt's home, they turned up pictures like this one on the screen of one or more, I believe two or maybe three of the women who would later say he was stalking them. And his explanation for this was, well, that's just a coincidence that these blonde, pretty young women that claim I'm stalking them, that all their pictures are in my home. My wife works at the newspaper and she brings home scrap paper. And this is just, we use the back of it for scrap paper. And this just happens to be what's on the other side of it.
And was there anything written on the other side of these?
I believe one or more of the women were circled.
No, but I mean, like, there's no apparent verification that they're using these same scraps to write on the back of them.
Yeah. Janet
like, here's
said
my
it was
grocery
scrap
list
paper that they
didn't want to waste.
Yeah, that they didn't want to waste. And I think she said something like, we discovered typographical errors or some other problem with what, so we just pulled that from the production and we used it as scrap paper at my house. What a coincidence.
And it's circling the same. We're not randomly circling this guy over here.
Nope.
On the right. We're not circling this guy over here on the left.
That's right.
We're not circling the brunettes. Like, just a hot mess. There's a lot that is very sus about Terry Britt, like way beyond even this. And I don't know if we want to continue down this spoke. There's so much. The Janet Britt apartment that she didn't want anyone to know she was leasing blows my mind.
So, yeah, this is another one of those things where it's like, okay, just buckle up. I'll just tell you.
I'll tell you. Get a seatbelt prop.
Yeah. So, during this investigation of the Holly Bobo disappearance, it turned out that a local police officer remembered that he'd been called out to what was called in as a burglary in progress or some kind of suspicious activity at a home. And according to a report that officer wrote, he went to this home where he was sent to check out whether or not it had been burglarized or whatever, and went in, and according to his report, he found the following. He found
buckle up
he found a room with a bed and like camera tripod or two and wires leaving from the tripods and running into another room. And in that other room was what appeared to be like a studio control set. And while they were looking around, they're like, this is weird. A woman shows up and she says, why are you here? And they report, we got told there might be a burglary. We should come check it out. This woman says to them, nah, this is my place. I rent it. Everything's fine. You don't need to do no investigation necessary. Everything's fine. And according to the report, she sort of tells them, I don't want anything written up. And this is in 2003 that this happens. I don't need anything written up. Everything's fine. You guys can go. That woman is Janet Britt, who shoos these police
She was
away
Janet
from,
Martin then?
Yeah. Yeah. So you have the police show up to what is a weird thing, like what appears to be a place somebody is creating videos. And while they're there, Janet Britt shows up and says something to this police officer like, you don't need to do a report. I don't need my name attached to this. Everything's fine. You can go. Apparently, he didn't make much of it until later. And he wrote the report later from his memory. But nonetheless, it's kind of weird. Now,
it's not weird.
It's kind of weird. This is the same year I think she married Terry Britt. And so I was going to explain my theory about Terry Britt's day. I should add, it's a theory. It's not necessarily a fact. I'm just going to tell you what I think the evidence.
Well, remember these layers. Wife works at the newspaper.
And
Terry Britt's not supposed to have
Joe's
a phone.
Video, and yeah, she also works at Joe's Video in Tanning. Terry Britt is later discovered to regularly possess a cell phone that is unregistered on his sex offender registry, and an untraceable burner phone that had been at Walmart in the couple of weeks before the abduction and bought a lot of minutes. Okay. So I think it's possible that Terry Britt, now a couple other things. Natalie and Holly complained that while they were out sunbathing one day on the deck in the weeks before Holly's abduction, they got creeped out and thought somebody had been in the woods watching them. The police, after the abduction, would recover cigarette butts from the tree line.
Same brand?
I don't remember, and I'm not sure that it would matter because I think I could be wrong, but I believe that it has been investigated and determined that Terry Britt will smoke whatever's cheap. So I'm not
okay.
I don't
Fair
know.
enough.
I don't remember that for sure, but whatever. There is a theory that now when the police wrote the search warrant, and I'm sorry to jump around, it's just crazy. When the police wrote the search warrant to go execute the search warrant at Terry Britt's home, they also secretly installed wiretaps in his home, which had never been done in Tennessee. The state authorities had never put a wiretap in a home in Tennessee.
And that's important for the technical application.
Yeah,
like you don't just get hired to go install satellite dishes and on your first day you know how to do it.
Right. So the police go out and search Terry Britt's home, and they come up with some interesting stuff. Nothing conclusive, but interesting nonetheless. They place wiretaps. Terry Britt is later heard saying, don't say too much, they're listening. Things like that. There's a theory here that what happened that day is that Terry Britt had finally, he finally could resist his impulses no more. And on his own abducted Holly Bobo. When the police sought the search warrant several years later, Brent Booth, who was a principal investigator in this case, wrote the affidavit that said that he believed there was probable cause to believe that Terry Britt and Janet Britt acting together kidnapped Holly Bobo. That she was his accomplice. She had been known to be his accomplice in a kidnapping
Probable
previously, to
cause for
wit,
search or for arrest?
they said probable cause to believe the crime, that they had committed the crime.
So for arrest.
Well, in this case, it was a search warrant application, but
Okay, search warrant application.
yeah. So, so the search warrant was a few months after the abduction, I believe, later that year in 2011. So Brent Booth, one of the principal law enforcement officers involved in this investigation, opined under oath that he believed that Terry and Janet acting together had committed the crimes against Holly Bobo. They go to they serve the search warrant. Terry Britt gets picked up on some failure to register or whatever properly. But I think here's a theory
This is
that,
going into 2012, right? This is like
yeah, this
December,
is
January
11, end of
timeframe.
11, beginning of 12. I've kicked this around in my head, and nothing I know extinguishes this as a theory. I think it's possible that Terry Britt was, yes, it is docket decoder. Yes, the prior incident had something to do with the affidavit, including that Janet was considered a potential accomplice. The I think it's possible that Terry Britt. Oh, keep this in mind too. When you look at this map, Terry Britt and Janet Britt, and Terry in particular, drove these roads in the middle of the night all the time to deliver newspapers. So
Oh.
Terry Britt would not have needed a map. Terry Britt knew these roads like the back of his hand. He had lived in this community for a long time.
Do you
He
have random detail maybe, but do you have an indication like how early in the morning their newspaper route was?
They frequently drove around until 3 or 4 in the morning and then got home and went to bed. And in fact, that night, Terry Britt's story is we delivered the papers, came home, Janet and I were home the rest of the day. We woke up and went about our business buying the tub. I think it's possible that what happened here was that Terry could no longer resist his impulse to go get someone and went and got Natalie. And I think it's possible that Terry
You mean
Britt
Holly?
believed Holly, I'm sorry, Holly. I think it's possible that Terry Britt believed that he had successfully abducted Holly and would have hours before she was missing. He did not realize that Clint Bobo was at home because Dana and Karen Bobo, Holly's parents, had left early as they always did to go to work. And Clint Bobo's truck, unlike almost every other day or car, had been put in a barn that they had cleaned out recently. So if you stalked and staked out the Bobo family for some time leading up to the abduction, if you walked up to that tree line in the back of the house on April 13th, 2011, and you didn't see Clint Bobo's car, you might have presumed he was gone too. I think it's entirely possible that Terry Britt and Janet Britt contemplated kidnapping Natalie, and that it didn't happen when they thought they might do it, or that Terry jumped the gun, whatever. I think it's entirely possible that Terry Britt left that property thinking he had hours of head start on any law enforcement. Terry Britt's history is ghastly. What he has done with prior kidnapping victims, I won't even, it just suffice to say that his history, according to prior victims, is that he will torture them for hours.
And I just don't get how that gets you a plea deal, shorter sentences. It happens more than like to me that seems like aggravating. It wouldn't just be like
Some of this happened at a
many
different,
years ago.
yes, in a different world. So I think it's possible that Terry jumped the gun on a plan that Janet might have known about or been part of or planned to be part of. I think it's possible that what happened was he got a hold of Holly and was on his way to do what he had previously done. and got a phone call on his burner from Janet, who would, of course, been one of the first to know in the newsroom. And that accelerated the events of the day and suddenly caused him to have to play it by ear and kind of make it up as he went along. I don't know that Holly would have survived that day. I don't, I don't know that. I don't know that if it was in fact Terry Britt that did this, that Holly had any chance of surviving that encounter. I do believe that she was dead within an hour of her abduction. I believe she was dead at that location. I believe her remains stayed there the whole time. And I think that everything that happened next was Terry Britt scrambling to try to stay ahead of and create an alibi rather hurriedly. And I think that explains why things were discarded along the route, seemingly thrown from a window. I think it's a terrible tragedy and coincidence that Shane Austin's trailer is on that route. I think that Terry Britt might very well have gotten all the way to Gooch Creek and realized that he needed to get rid of the phone or make the phone disabled before he went home. And I think it's entirely possible that Terry Britt went home and knew that he was covered in DNA and bagged up his clothes, took a shower, and ripped that tub out from the wall and took all those clothes and that tub to the dump. And then what the police rolled up on later that day was Terry Britt attempting to install a tub that he never thought he would have to explain why it was in his driveway or why he was doing it that day. I think he wanted rid of all the DNA he could get rid of.
And that's hard to conceptualize as someone like, I don't have to plan for these sort of things. But to me, that is a very plausible reason why you'd leave a body behind and try to alibi and say you wouldn't have been there, rather than try to, at that point in time, bring a body. As a sex offender, you're going to know that you're going to be the first person they're looking at.
Yeah. Now, so so in a nutshell, I think Terry Britt, it's entirely plausible based upon what I know that Terry Britt is the abductor, that Terry Britt took her directly to the scene of her remains and killed her there, and then scrambled to cover his tracks for the rest of the day, and seemingly successfully. That is a theory that I cannot extinguish based upon the things that I know. There is no credible evidence to answer the questions on the screen. There's no credible evidence that Holly's body or person was anywhere else besides on this route in the wake of her abduction. No credible evidence that her living or deceased body was ever anywhere else after that, after her phone arrived at that cell location where she was later recovered. Her remains were recovered 3.5 years later. So
and there's two ways, right? You have what actually happened, right, is one path of thinking and reasoning, but then there's the constraint that the state puts on it where they adopt Jason Autry's story. So that's another spoke we've got to get to.
Just getting to that.
They've locked themselves into Holly being killed that day, because that's the story they present at trial, but they say that Zachary Adams and Jason Autry are the perpetrators rather than Terry Britt. So the state has adopted a one-day timeline death.
That's right. And now, if you want to entertain the state's timeline and theory here, let me, looking at this map, tell you what you must be willing to believe. Okay? Here's what you must be willing to believe if you're going to try to vouch for the state's theory of this case as presented in the evidence.
I'm going to try to follow with my little mouse.
You have to be willing to believe that a person who does not fit the description that would be given of Zach, Jason, Shane, or Dylan walked Holly off the property. Not one of those men could reasonably or even unreasonably be described in the way that Clint Bobo's eyewitness testimony was. Okay.
They were all doing meth at the time. So they were all like very thin.
Jason Autry is half a foot taller. Zach is 80 pounds lighter. Shane has red hair. And Dylan is smaller than Zach. So there is no world in which Clint Bobo's eyewitness testimony is consistent with any of these four eventual suspects. Okay, that's number one.
And Clint
So we have
lines up a body type. So Terry
that's
Britt's
right.
on the left here. And was Richie Pratt someone that he was just familiar with and said, "Hey, he kind of reminds me of this
I
person
think
that I
Pratt
know"?
might have been a cousin or a friend. Honestly,
His
I think
relevance was for Clint's comparison, though,
I
right?
think
There's
Terry.
no.
Yeah, I think Richie Pratt was Holly's cousin. But the important part of this is, if you want to believe the state, they have not explained this fifth man, because this description that Clint Bobo gives is not any of the four defendants or suspects. Okay, number one. Number two, and this is where it gets absolutely absurd. Go back to that map. You have to believe that one or more of these men, without having their phone on them, but while making phone calls, because the four of them are
And
making
Facebook
phone calls.
posts,
That's right. The
which were
four of
not
them are
easy with
making.
certain types of phones back then.
That's right. At a minimum, Zach and Jason Autry are communicating with each other. So if you want to believe the state's theory, you have to believe that while Zach or someone is involved in this first leg
Yep,
of
that's like
the
this
abduction,
area.
that Zach is taking calls casually from people as if none of that was happening. He's involved in a kidnapping, but he's also chit-chatting on the phone and texting. Okay, fine. It gets worse. You also have to believe that whoever the abductor is, gets Holly's phone and some of her things, presumably Holly, to that location where her remains are later found. And if you want to believe Jason Autry's story, it must be that whichever one or series or combination of them were there, not including Jason Autry, that they must have believed they'd killed her successfully there, because Jason Autry shows up at the trailer, which is around where it says cell phone, where in the box that says something like 9:02 a.m., where the phone turns right south on that number 13 there.
I was gonna say, I wonder if we could use this map here.
Yeah, so zoom in and
I,
see if it's got Shane's trailer.
because since you don't have Holly's phone pinging over by this bridge, we don't have that on the first map. But this is a very critical part of what we're going to have to add to the
That's right.
story.
So zoom in and see if you can get to Shane's trailer. Okay.
Oh, that's parents' house.
Well, keep zooming in. Victor Dinsmore's property, Yellow Spring, the barn, Shane Austin's parents' home, alleged rape location. Okay, in this area. Here's what you also have to be willing to believe: that presumably Zach, but maybe not, the state doesn't really know, sometime while Holly's phone is completing this route at Gooch Creek, Holly is in fact apparently dead in the back of Zach's truck at Shane Austin's trailer. Okay. And that's when Jason Autry shows up looking for dope. He gets his dope. And this is when, even though her phone is not there, this is when, according to Jason Autry, Zach says, "Hey, man, I need help getting rid of this body." And this is when this adventure down to the river and back begins, right?
So to put it
And
into context, these two cell towers, you guys, if we were to look at the map, the two yellow bubbles here are critical spokes from here.
That's right.
Like they're the wings. The left side is the yellow circle 1 would be here, yellow circle 2 would be here, and then the third yellow circle we're about to talk about is going to be over in this area.
So to believe the state's theory as told through Autry, someone not fitting the description that Clint Bobo gives snatches Holly up and takes her, or at least her phone, to this cell phone tower where her remains are eventually found. Presumably, they leave there thinking they have a dead body with them, because they arrive in Zach's truck with a body. According to Jason Autry, he shows up, he gets high, he gets enlisted in this effort to dispose of the body. So they jump in the car and run out, drive out of the driveway off to dispose of this body, when they concoct along the way the idea that they're going to gut her and sink her in the river. So off to the
All the way
river
over
they go,
here.
all the way over there. Now her phone never goes there, okay? But they get to the river,
But
and
their story for that is, didn't they say that Dylan took the phone and Dylan was driving this right spoke route at that time? That
well,
was
they
how they tried
actually, I
to.
don't think they've ever actually attempted to articulate that in the courtroom.
You might be right.
They
At
that
least not
that
in front
that
of a jury.
no, it, yes, if you want to believe Jason Autry's story, someone must have been driving her phone around without their own,
At 9:10.
because we know for a fact that Jason Autry and Zach Adams' phones go east towards the river. Okay. But if you want to believe what Jason Autry says, they take this body to the river. And this is when Jason Autry realizes, quote, this bitch ain't dead. And this is when he says, Zach pulls out a gun, shoots her in the back of the head. And then they hear a outboard motor start up. So they panic, throw her back in the truck, and haul ass all the way back to Shane Austin's trailer where they started.
And this
Now,
is federal property where you shouldn't be hearing
that's
gunshots.
right. Now, by this time, law enforcement is out looking for Holly Bobo en masse. So, having aborted the effort to gut her and throw her in the river, they load her up and take her right back where they started an hour or so before. And that's when Jason Autry says, he's like, you know what? I got to go have lunch with my girlfriend. Peace out. In spite of all of the above, apparently the state's theory is that someone went back to where they thought they killed her the first time and left her body there once and for all. Because her body is in fact recovered where the phone stopped for 30 minutes the morning she was abducted.
I'm going to pop back to this one because this is, again, if we look at this mapping, this left spoke, remember, we start down here. This is early in the morning. By 8:16, we're over here. The phone is stopping for 30 minutes here, which might be the panic moment. Moment of panic. Let's go to this logging road over here and dump the remains. By the theory that you presented, which I think is
but I mean,
most sensible.
Just for a moment, imagine this. You believe you have killed Holly Bobo at this remote location where her remains are in fact recovered 3.5 years later.
But
Do
then
you
take
leave
her
her there?
all the way over here.
No, you don't leave her there. You take her to your friend's house. Then you call Jason Autry and enlist him in a failed effort to dispose of her body. You ride all the way down to the river and back with the body. And then at some point, you take her back where you could have left her to begin with when you thought you killed her the first time.
With a pickup truck.
That is
open bed.
That is the state's theory. Now,
it gets
doesn't
worse.
work for me. Yeah, all along the way, someone is out fabricating this route for Holly's phone in an effort to conceal her true whereabouts. And they are doing so without having their own phone on them because it never goes where her phone goes. So the state, even in 2025, cannot tell you when her phone and her body were separated or who is responsible for this route John Walker's map shows or who the person who walked her off the property is. They still can't answer those questions.
Well, and even worse, they're taking this information. The reason we have the bridge come into the picture for anyone that's uninitiated on the deep dives into this case is it's agreed upon that the guys went over here, but it seems like they went over here pretty regularly to smoke. And there's graffiti. Zach and his girlfriend have graffiti on the bridge. And
yeah, I've been under this bridge, and it is exactly the kind of place that if you were going to drink beer, smoke weed, do meth, hang out, throw rocks, this is where you go. I mean, it's rural West Tennessee.
Which would not be where I'd want to go dump a body.
And not only that, and I mean, I can't really put my head into the mind of someone who suddenly find themselves with a body to dispose of. But to get to that water underneath that bridge, you would drive past so many places that you might have dumped a body that are virtually identical to the place that the body was eventually actually dumped. In other words,
it's so wooded.
Yeah, this adventure to the river
with a
you would have,
pickup truck, open bed.
yes, yes. And by the way, Jason Autry's story is debunked completely by about this to the river and back. It didn't happen because the phones, Zach's phone returns from the area around the bridge to the Parsons exit at a speed that cannot be accomplished on the back roads that Jason Autry says they took. It can only be accomplished if you get on the interstate and go west.
Well, that's down here, right?
Yeah, Jason Autry's got these guys going this incredibly back roads way to and from the river.
Can you
Which,
speak to the
Katie?
friction post-conviction from the state? Because I picked up on it during the post-conviction hearings. There are things that it's not just the prosecutors taking the stand, it's also some of the TBI agents. You can tell when they know what subject area Zach Adams' attorney, Doug Bates, is getting into, and you could see they're already trying to get ahead of it, deflect. And this idea, well, did you test the routes yourself? How fast would you have to be driving? You could tell by the way they were responding to Doug's questions on this issue.
Yeah. Well,
that
so
it didn't seem like they knew they had no answer.
They don't, because it can't be done. I tried it myself. A year ago, I took Jason Autry's explanation and attempted to make it work.
Now during Jason Autry's proffer time, when he's starting to give information to the state, they have him, they get him from custody, and we hear Kathy Ferguson was falling behind in a vehicle. So we hear about this story from Kathy Ferguson, but it was other. She wasn't in the vehicle.
Well,
Jason Autry was in.
Yeah. Let me just point out a couple other things that I find unusual. They finally crack the case. They finally have one of the perpetrators willing to tell them what happened. Okay. Jason Autry finally says, "I'll tell you what happened," right? So they get him out of prison and they load him up in a car with his lawyer. And according to the prosecution, his lawyers say, "Would you guys mind not recording this visit?" And they're like, "Sure, no problem." The only record of this incredibly important day where Jason Autry takes a bunch of them on a field trip to articulate the route that they took that day. The only record of that event is created 6 months after the fact in an IR. Okay? No one writes down anything at the time. No one records anything at the time.
Wait. So is this a different late documentation? I have my little timeline that keeps growing. But guys, in short, there's this weird scenario. We're going to get into Victor Dinsmore, and this is probably a good time to segue once we close out this. We'll talk about why it's not just the Parsons location.
Listen, I just got to tell your listeners right now, I am not a loon. I am legitimately mentally healthy. I have been a trial lawyer for 30 something years. I am not a crackpot. I'm telling you I'm not, but everything I'm telling you would probably lead you to believe it.
You can borrow my avatar if you want.
Right? That's how I feel right now. For sure. I feel that way.
Am I blocking the timeline? That's important. So
okay, so yeah, so in
we have this proffer session.
Yeah, and it's about 6 months between this road trip with Jason Autry where he explains to them the roads they took and what happened that day, and the creation of an investigative report.
So they're doing that January, February.
That sounds about right. It's about 6 months or so.
It'd be like here.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It struck me as odd that nobody wrote down what Jason Autry told him until 6 months or so later, and that no one recorded it and no one took any contemporaneous notes with which to prepare the appropriate report when they got around to it 6 months later.
And I understand they did the same thing with the spoken proffer session, because this wasn't the test drive day. So looking at this May 8th, this is a different proffer session, just face-to-face, no weird... I took you off the screen. I'm sorry. I hid you.
That's all right.
I hit you. We're so deep into this. But then they don't document that session. Of course, they don't take notes during the session because that would be discoverable.
It is in this case, one of the things that's astonishing to me is what they did not record and what they did.
It's like reverse. It's like flip-flopped.
Well, I would think if you were going to interview the key witness who was going to unlock the case for you, that you were going to eventually give a time served deal, and upon whom your entire case rests. You wouldn't want that guy crawfishing on you and lying later about what he told you when he did the proffer. They didn't record that. They didn't take any notes of that. But when they went and browbeat Victor Dinsmore and told him what they needed him to say so that he could get his story right, they recorded that. It's backwards. And guys, from
this is couched between. They have Jason proffer. Then they go the same month. They go and speak to Victor Dinsmore, who we're going to talk a little bit more about Victor Dinsmore. Because he's another character. They have these recordings and trial and error podcasts, Dana, all on their channel. You can go listen to those.
Yeah. Here's a fun game that I was playing. Yeah, here's a fun game that I was playing while you were live streaming the original trial. How many rapists did the state call to the stand to convict Zach Adams? Because I lost count, I think, at 3. But there
was one guy that seemed so nice on direct with Jennifer Nichols, and then on cross, it's like, oh, you.
Oh yeah, oops.
Corey Rivers. Yeah, that was the time.
I'm sorry. Anyway, I interrupted you.
Yes. Oh, no, that's okay. So Victor Dinsmore is going to be a character, but they run, and these recordings, you can go listen to them on the Trial and Error podcast. I forget, it's episode 9 is the main one. It's called Suborning Perjury, but it's really all about these Victor Dinsmore recorded interviews with TBI agent Brent Booth. And something makes him go back a second day. So he's there on May 18th.
Well, I think we all know what that was.
On the 19th. And he goes, I just wanted to make sure I didn't put words in your mouth.
Right. Let me finish this thing with Autry. So Autry, they get him out, they ride him around, and he tells them this incredible story that involves, among other things, this scene that struck me as straight out of The Godfather when they execute Fredo. Boom, 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 when the birds fly away.
This is at the bridge, you guys.
This is at the bridge, right? By the way, conveniently, a witness has now surfaced who apparently will testify that he is the boater who started the engine that heard the boom. Now, he's never testified. He has now come forward to say that back in 2011, on the day Holly Bobo was kidnapped, I heard this gunshot that Jason Autry has described. So,
here we go.
Boom, boom, boom. Jason Autry's story, right? The state, you were asking about the route and the things that have happened that where they kind of seem to have been caught with their pants down. Yep, get this. The state in May of 2025 went out and attempted to recreate Jason Autry's boom, boom, boom.
After you guys, this was after they already knew that you guys had went out, and I don't know if you published the episode or maybe we
had run the route. Yeah. But they
confronted them.
Yeah, they tried to recreate the boom, boom, boom. They couldn't even get the gunshot to sound louder than the traffic on the bridge. So their explanation for that was, well, we don't know what the atmospherics were like in April of 2011. Could be different, blah, 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 whatever. But to give you an idea of how desperate they are. That sounds
like a defense attorney argument.
They're trying to create authenticity in Jason Autry's story, and they can't, because not only did they fail to replicate the boom, 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 not a single state witness has come up to the stand yet and said, we jumped in the car and did the route and we made it work. It can be done. You know why? Because it can't be done. I tried it. Paul Dillon tried it. Who knows who's actually tried it from the state and failed and, conveniently not written a report, but you can't do it. You cannot make Jason Autry's story work. And Paul Dillon did it. When I drove it, I did it trying to replicate I don't want to get stopped for speeding. Paul Dillon did it that way, and then Paul Dillon, who testified earlier in this post-conviction relief, he did it as fast as he could do it without wrecking,
Was
and he
that one of
couldn't
the
make it.
days that wasn't
Yeah,
recorded?
I
Okay,
think
so
they. I
can
think
you give some? That would have been May, maybe.
yeah. So yes, in May, a private investigator hired by Zach's team went out. Well, the testimony was in May, but the experiment or effort to replicate it was earlier.
Well, the
Uh,
reason I'm asking is, we're missing bits and
yeah,
pieces of the May hearings, but when we're
yeah.
watching some of the August and the November, when these issues come up, this is what I'm
hmm
saying. You can tell they know they have to counteract what's already been testified to,
Well, good luck because
and
they're out of witnesses. I I'm fairly certain they are not going to produce a witness that's going to say I ran the route and I can make the timing work, because you can't. Um, so uh, Paul Dillon's testimony about the impossibility of replicating Jason Autry's timeline for the there and back, I believe, will go unchallenged. It simply is not happening.
well, and I would love new trial. Imagine there's so many I would love to have like a panel. We can get, Docket Decoder, you could come up. We could get Miss Janet Demeanor, Defense Diaries, all you guys after the new year, like a new year, new trial. Like think about all of the opportunities for cross-examination in a new trial. And even just
Well,
this idea that there's going to be a witness that's going to say they heard the gunshot. You just go, this is rural Tennessee and the coon hunt just happened and it's like hunting season. Everybody's out trying to hunt. Are you crazy? What is, and I
when
wouldn't
did you
badger the
realize
guy.
that you needed to come tell the police that on the day Holly Bobo was kidnapped, you heard a gunshot under the bridge where there shouldn't have been a gunshot at all?
Can you tell us what it sounded like?
Yeah, boom, boom, boom. Apparently, I
Oh,
mean, so
oh.
I'll let that testimony unfold as it may in
As
court,
time
whatever.
goes on. That was
So
great contextualization with because we are missing the bits and pieces of, we know Kathy Ferguson was sitting in for the hearings, all the post-conviction hearings. So
mhm.
by the time she testified, she heard everything else that was testified to. But we're missing those chunks and pieces of what was known. I only realized this week, I think, about the Joe Walker testimony at the post-conviction hearings, where everything that follows, Attorney Doug Bates now has it on the record, testimony from Joe Walker, that he gives a separate version of discovery that's actually accessible, 2 discs of discovery, to Jason Autry's attorney in November.
Here's I have a I'll articulate another theory that I think I can't I've tried and tried as a trial lawyer. I always think, well, what would I do if I were the other side, right? I don't just worry about what I'm going to do or what my evidence is going to be. I also try to turn the chessboard around and play the other pieces. Here's what I think happened. I think Jason Autry um, was wily enough and experienced enough in the system to know that all of them were going to prison for this. The only question was, who
Who's
is
gonna
someone
run
getting the death
first?
penalty and who's going to get the deal? If you watch Jason Autry's recant video given to Dr. Spirko, he articulated that he told his lawyer when they came in to see him early on, he said, rope ain't tight enough yet. Right? I think Jason Autry realized somewhere along the way that they were going to prison, that Holly Bobo, that the four of them, or by that time maybe Shane had died, that anyone put on trial for this case was going to prison. And that the only question was for how long and do you have a death penalty case?
And
I
I
think
want
what
to expand on that. I agree with him. There's some things he says that are really candid and really insightful. And guys, what we're talking about, if you have not done deep, you can see all my red play marks. If you go back 7 months ago, Trial and Error Podcast has a video. It's going to have this blue thumbnail, Star Witness
Yeah.
and Holly Bobo case recant. So you can go listen to this entire thing that we're talking about right now. I really think anybody, not just these 4 guys that was put on trial, would be convicted. We've talked about Terry Britt. You could pick a random Joe Schmo and say
I
they're the
think
ones that killed Holly Bobo and
I
the community would have pitchforked.
I'm going to say this with sincere respect for the people who served on this jury. Okay. I mean that. Holly Bobo was kidnapped in 2011. A beautiful, faultless young woman with a bright future was kidnapped from her driveway and vanished into thin air.
Yep.
That and I've thought about this a lot. The what happened here is unlike so many other kidnappings, abductions, or disappearances. Many times, the person who is kidnapped, abducted, or disappears is engaged in some decisions that people who see it or hear about it in the news are able to say, well, that would never happen to me or my daughter or my sister or my wife because my daughter, sister, wife, whatever, me would never be there doing that with those people, whatever. There's some ability for an observer who sees the news to say, to take some false comfort in the notion that, well, that would never happen here to me or to someone I know because we don't make those decisions. When Holly Bobo was kidnapped, no one had that covered. Nobody. A beautiful young woman who, through no fault of her own, was kidnapped out of her driveway in broad daylight. This is terrifying. This is
Yeah.
this is the stuff of like horror films, right? This is Buffalo Bill type stuff from the movies, right? So they don't have her remains for 3.5 years. They don't have anyone charged 3.5 years later in a community that is boiling and roiling with rumors and 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 accusations. The Bobo family is criticizing publicly the TBI. The TBI has lost confidence in their ability to tell the Bobos things because apparently they would go and tell the Bobos, we're working on a lead involving so and so, and Karen would jump in the car and go tell that person, I know you did it. Tell me what you did. So there was this rift between the family and the investigation. The community was just in upheaval, terrified that this was going to happen again at any moment. They don't have a body for 3.5 years. Once they get a body, they don't have a trial for another 3. By the time Zach Adams goes on trial, we are more than 6 years removed from Holly Bobo's kidnapping. With all due respect to that jury, they would have convicted a potted plant. They were not going home to church, to Rotary, to Little League. They were not going back into the community to say, I don't know, it was reasonable doubt. No.
I had a moment of shock that I reconsidered after I thought about it when I heard Jennifer Thompson at the post-conviction hearing say, I thought if the state was going to bring these charges that
They must be right.
They must be right. And I was like, what? You don't believe your client like automatically? And I realized I read that wrong. I really looked at that wrong. I looked at that in a bubble. But
well,
what I think is really happening, you have a death penalty case. Why would you go to this length if you didn't have any physical evidence?
Right. As a defense lawyer,
and you don't have a compelling witness.
You're so used to having people that did it or something like it that you believe if they're going to run this thing up to that level, well, they must know something. So, with all due respect to this jury,
and then she wasn't getting discovery, so she couldn't see what they had or didn't have.
Yeah. So I think what happened here was Jason Autry figured out that they were all going to prison. Jason Autry figured out that if he was the first one in, he could work something out to his advantage. He got the right lawyer for that, by the way. And so by the time Jason Autry tells his story, here's what he did. He takes the discovery and he figures out what he's got to be able to cover, what he's got to be able to account for, and maybe more importantly, the things that he cannot claim because they won't hold up in the discovery review, right? So here, if you listen to Jason Autry tell his story on the witness stand, Jason Autry tells the story of any given Wednesday in his life. He just weaves in a little bit of Holly Bobo being part of it. Because on any other Wednesday of Jason Autry's life, he gets up and calls Zach and says, got any dope? He gets up and he goes to the river and he does dope. He rides around, he goes and has lunch with his girlfriend. On any other day, this is what he did. on any other day, this is what they all did. They got up and they pursued dope and they got dope and they did dope and then they did it again. That's what they did. So when Jason Autry figured out where he needed to explain himself having been based upon the telephone records and who he talked
And
to.
we've really, I say we got to hammer out this. Where is this timeline? Like the timeline blows my mind. So, again, you went through, they don't have this body. The pressure's on. Karen Bobo is freaking out. There's a rift.
And by the way, let me
I've
say
got a
this
little bit
too.
about the infighting,
Yeah,
but
I do want to say this about the Bobo family. I hate what's happened to them because I don't think Zach did this. And if I'm right about that, then the Bobo family has not been given justice. They've been given the illusion of justice. And if it turns out that Zach's conviction is vacated, they're going to have to go through all this again in some way. They're either going to have to suffer that no prosecution happens. They're going to have to suffer that.
For those that didn't watch, can you give some context to, as a defense attorney, was it unusual to you what they had Karen Bobo going through on the stand, helping the state introduce evidence? I understand identifying personal affects to say, hey, this thing that was found, I'm the one that would have knowledge that my daughter's belongings are in there. It seemed like a bit much to me.
As a defense lawyer, you just have to know that the prosecution is going to try to give the jury a well-developed, three-dimensional human being victim. They're going to have to use family members and friends to tell you who this person is that was lost. Did they do too much? I don't want to. I'm not going to say.
Well, I'm just imagining if that was critical to their strategy, it would be something that she'd have to live through again.
God forbid. I mean, I hate that. I hate what may be coming for them because their daughter was undeniably abducted and undeniably murdered, and they have spent 14 years living with that now. And there's compelling reason to believe that the state got this wrong. And if Judge Bradbury agrees and vacates this conviction, then one of a few things is going to happen. The state's going to try Zach again, but this time it'll be very different. The state's not going to try Zach again. And then they're either going to try someone or no one. None of those things is the closure that the Bobo family has hoped they've had since 2017. None of them.
Nope.
And so I consider the Bobo family to be the victim of this miscarriage as well.
Well, and in a weird way, I think Karen Bobo was the biggest advocate. Of course, what I'm saying that in a bubble, right? Her going and knocking and speaking with witnesses could contaminate testimony. Like there's issues, but there's also an advocacy there that she wasn't getting from a unified or coherent law enforcement response.
You would like to think that it wouldn't take 3.5 years for the remains to show up, quite apparently by accident. And you would like to think it wouldn't take 6 years to put together a case that you could put on trial. So you want to segue to the Victor Dinsmore fiasco element?
Yeah,
here?
I mean, it's really all related because how Jason Autry put his story together, Victor Dinsmore is a critical part of that. And I think we have a great question from Amy. Let's explain the shifting in. We have Dylan Adams, and I don't know if you want to do a quick Piercy Brothers. I think if we, how do we?
Quick disclosure, this question is posed by my wife.
She looks awesome, so I'm not surprised.
so, um, so,
She's helping us out.
that's right. So,
She says
let's,
explain to the
yeah.
chat.
Um,
Can we say how we got why the state switched and looked to Autry? Because at first they were looking at Dylan Adams, and they were looking at Dylan Adams. There's like this weird side story where the two Piercy brothers, Mark and Jeff Piercy, come into play because there's a town rumor about a Holly on a video.
That's right. There's a rumor that the rape of Holly Bobo has been captured on video, and that somehow the Piercy brothers have it or are connected to it. They get indicted out of this rumor. Um, it it's my understanding that it turns out that this video is not it's obviously not Holly, that's for sure. It's my understanding that the video in question was someone else, and eventually the state just completely abandons these charges against the Piercy brothers, but not before they make a big mess of it.
Well, and it's a
So
weird order of events because like we see all this media coverage, and we did a deep dive on that, guys. I think it's really telling to go back and look at the contemporaneous media coverage. Jeff Piercy around October or around July is saying I'm innocent. Like, and I wonder, like, all these people that might be falsely accused, I'm losing my job. This is July 1st.
right,
All the way forward in October, we hear, and it's weird because it's announced that Mark Piercy and Dylan Adams have certain charges dropped. And then only later do we get the decision that they're not going to pursue charges against Jeff Piercy. And there's like a weird limbo going on with the timeline that seemed odd.
oh, it's
And
the video in question apparently was a video recorded between consenting adults. At the time that this case was going on, there was this social media page called Topics that I mean, if you ever want to read some
I started
insane,
to, guys. It's like
uh,
a forum, and it's archived on like
yeah,
the Who is the Wayback Machine.
yeah. Now, okay, so to answer the question about Jason Autry's first lawyers, um, I knew them both. Competent trial lawyers, but not without their own problems. One of them was disbarred and convicted of felony. The other had some issues, and I don't think was disbarred, but essentially had some disciplinary problems or some health problems or whatever. So long before trial, Jason Autry ends up having to replace his lawyers. The lawyer that replaces these two other fellas is a guy well known to the prosecution team. He's out of Memphis, and he's made deals with these prosecutors before. So he was working with people he knew. And when it came time for him to do his job, he was the right guy for the job because he knew these prosecutors, and they were able to let's say, rely upon their history together. And here again, in a world in which you think that things should be written down, things were not written down. And I don't want to disparage anyone or anything like that, so I'll just say the facts of the matter were these. Jason Autry gave a proffer, admitted his role and presence at a murder, testified under oath, and got Zach convicted. He did so with no written plea agreement, and according to all these people, he did so only with the understanding that his cooperation would be considered. And after Zach's motion for a new trial and sentencing and everything else was complete, and it was the only thing left to do at that point was appeal, Jason Autry was allowed to enter his plea of guilty for his role in the Holly Bobo case as he described it, which, by the way, didn't happen, but whatever.
You'll never guess the time of the sentence.
And
from
his sentence,
facing the death penalty to
he went from being indicted and being a co-defendant in a death penalty case to being sentenced to 8 years to serve concurrent with an 8-year sentence he was already serving in another case. Stated differently, Jason Autry served not 1 minute more in prison than he otherwise would have anyway for what he said he did on the day Holly Bobo was murdered. That deal was reached through a lawyer that had known Jennifer Nichols for a long time and who somehow made his way out of Memphis and all the way to Savannah, Tennessee to facilitate this result.
They were saying it was like, did you say it was like 200 miles or something? It was like a crazy figure during the post-conviction hearings. Was the distance he
I
had to go
don't
to
know this to
transport.
be true, but I doubt that gentleman has ever had any other cases in Savannah, Tennessee. So, want to go on to Dinsmore?
Yeah, but let's really hammer out this timeline. So we have this discovery going to Autry again. This is Matt Scholl is getting this around 2016, November 2016. In May 8th, Nichols has this proffer session that she won't document down in a report until June 12th. She just waits to document it. She doesn't take any contemporaneous notes. It's not memorialized as a published IR until June. We get these May trips to Dinsmore from Brent Booth. Or do we need to describe the
before we
Dennis
get to
Benjamin
Booth,
trips?
Before we get to Booth, let's talk about Dennis Benjamin. We just
Let's
dropped
get some
an episode.
Pictures.
Yeah, we just dropped some stuff on Dinsmore through our podcast. By the way, go back one slide.
Oh, yeah. Kinsley, we love Kinsley.
Yes, so this is Kinsey the intern. Kinsey, I'm trying to talk her out of it, but Kinsey wants to be a lawyer. Kinsey has done some extraordinary work in this case. So Kinsey the intern has her own thing going here. She's helping develop this story. And
he wants to do trial work because I can picture cross-examining the mess out of somebody.
Yeah. So Kinsey does a complete takedown of why this 380 pistol casing that's recovered at the scene is so problematic for the
next
state.
to Holly's skull.
Yeah, so at the scene of Holly's remains, a number of things are found. I think her lipstick and like a key, some keys, or stuff that a 20-year-old girl would probably have with her going anywhere. There's some things like that scattered around. Yeah, and there's a few ammunition casings located nearby. A 410 shotgun shell, a 308 casing, and a 380 casing. Okay. Now, the presence of a 308 in this location, 308 casing, not surprising. I can certainly imagine someone being up there shooting at a deer, hunting a deer out there, then, and so a 308 casing.
Well, hold on. These pictures on the screen are from the evolving story from Jason Autry. These are not the other casings that were found. So let's clarify, since we have this image on the screen, this relates to the evolving story of the supposed murder weapon. That's
right. So there's a 308 sitting there. It does not factor in the murder. It can't factor in the murder. The deformity in the skull can't possibly be a 308. Okay. Likewise, the 410 shell that's found there from a shotgun could be somebody out there squirrel hunting, whatever. It also clearly never factors in this murder because the wound is inconsistent and can't be a 410 under any circumstances. However, there's a 380 shell casing out there, which for people that may not be familiar with firearms, a 380 is a small pistol round. Okay. It's, in my opinion, barely adequate for self-defense. It is certainly not anything that anyone would be out there shooting as a hunting weapon. And frankly, having been to that scene, I don't know that anyone would ever go there to do any target practice with a 380. That just doesn't make any sense to me. However, the diameter of the projectile of a 380 bullet is consistent with the wound and the deformity in Holly's skull. So stated differently, found at the scene with her skull is the casing from a gun that could have been the murder weapon. Okay.
Pretty nice fit.
Convenient. You would think the state would go to great lengths to explain the presence of this 380. You would think the state would have, from that moment forward, been very interested in 380s. Instead, through the most immaculate chain of custody one will ever see in a criminal case, the existence of this 32 revolver that is supposedly the murder weapon is not only covered by Jason Autry, but also by Victor Dinsmore, who turns up with what turns out to be the state's murder weapon just weeks before the trial and says, "Here you go, guys." So there are
And
issues.
it wasn't a 32 revolver for the weeks leading up to that. They had to iron out
No.
which they thought it was, which is why we have
Victor
these other
Dinsmore,
examples on the screen.
So let me tell you who Victor Dinsmore is. Victor Dinsmore is a man who lived in the community, who, by the way, his home is on that John Walker map. Victor Dinsmore, years before Holly Bobo was abducted, had been convicted of a rape. And so when, and this is, I mean, I'm telling you what Victor Dinsmore says. Victor Dinsmore is well aware that with a missing girl and his criminal history, they're going to look at him, right? So Victor Dinsmore is also a local drug dealer. He is trafficking in narcotics to, among others, Zach and Shane, and through them to Jason Autry. So this crew of criminals, they know each other. Victor Dinsmore gets very nervous about his status in this case as potential suspect, and during this investigation decides to relocate and move to Indianapolis, or the Indianapolis area. Once the state issues the order, get off of Terry Britt, we're not looking at Terry Britt, we need some other suspects. A man named Jack Van Hooser, who is the special agent in charge at this region for the TBI, apparently is, let's say at a minimum, acquainted with a man named Dennis Benjamin, shown here on your screen. Dennis Benjamin is a retired cop from Memphis. He's a retired street cop, did vice, violent crimes, that kind of thing. Knows his way around a crime, violent crime, criminals, street, drugs, that kind of thing. It appears to me, from things I'm not going to talk about, but that I believe to be true, that Dennis Benjamin is introduced into this equation through and by Jack Van Hooser. And before long, Dennis Benjamin is essentially acting as quasi-investigator, man with a retired cop with a retired cop's badge, the apparent blessing of the TBI to help out however he can, and the explicit blessing of the Bobo family to do whatever he can to solve this crime. Okay. So Dennis Benjamin shows up and starts working to help. And before long, Dennis Benjamin zeroes in on, among other people, Victor Dinsmore. And he tracks Victor Dinsmore down. And this is part of what shocks me about what is and isn't recorded in this case. Dennis Benjamin travels to Indianapolis and confronts Victor Dinsmore. And this is in, I believe, 2014. And Dennis Benjamin tells Victor Dinsmore, look here, I'm here on behalf of the Bobo family, and I've had long meetings with the TBI, Jack Van Hooser, and the Bobos, and we know you were involved. And this is your only chance to come clean. The Bobo family wants their daughter, her body, and we know you know some. And if you don't give it up to me right now, you're getting caught up in a death penalty case, and we already got 8 felonies to put on you. 3 of them carry the death penalty. And Densmore says, I don't know anything about that. You're wrong. You're crazy. I don't have nothing to do with it. And Benjamin tells him, now I know you didn't go fetch her up. I know you didn't go actually kidnap her, but I know you were involved that day. And Benjamin just goes straight at him. And he tells this convicted rapist, who's essentially left the jurisdiction, you are not getting out of this. And if I have to go home and tell the Bobo family that I gave you a chance to return their daughter's body to them and you didn't, you're getting a death penalty case. Now, straighten up. Let me know. Tell me right now. Densmore basically tells him to pound sand, kick rocks, get lost. But Densmore is still talking to, among others, Brent Booth. So some months later, once they've got Autry flipped and Autry's singing and telling his story, Brent Booth, an active TBI agent and senior investigator in this trial, tracks down Victor Densmore again. Victor Densmore, by this time, has been given an immunity letter. He's been told, you cooperate with us, no prosecution. You're immune. Booth goes up there ostensibly to serve him a subpoena, him and his wife, for the trial. And when he finishes serving the subpoena,
removed years in time, by the way.
It's a few months later. It's months later. It is months later. Booth goes up and tracks down Victor Densmore and says, here's your subpoena. You know you got your immunity letter. How's everything going, buddy? They're chit-chatting. Oh, your daughter, good to hear, blah, blah, blah. Booth says, well, hey, while I'm here, let me check a few things out with you. Here's what you need to know. Autry's flipped. Densmore says, all the way. Meaning, did he say everything? Booth goes, yeah. But I need to make sure, I need to nail down some details. And I need to make sure that what happened, because it'd be real helpful to me if you'd help me out with these details. Well, we've got a whole episode on this, but before long,
watch it twice.
Essentially, Victor Densmore goes from saying to Booth, I don't know anything about hiding a car. That didn't happen. And Booth says to him, correct, Sheriff, well, let me tell you what's going to be testified to. Let me tell you what this other witness is going to say.
Crazy.
And he essentially picks up where Dennis Benjamin left off in this tuning up and says, here's what I need you to, basically, here's what we need you to say. You like your immunity letter? You don't want to be joined in as a defendant? Here's what we need. So what Dennis Benjamin and then Brent Booth have done is they've got Jason Autry over here with most of the story. They need Victor Densmore to vouch for that and pick up and tell the rest of it.
It's circular corroboration.
That's right. And before long, Victor Densmore consents to saying basically whatever he needs to say. And he agrees to testify that Zach hit a car in his garage that day, the white truck. And he also later comes up with the alleged murder weapon that Jason Autry subsequently comes to trial and says, I saw that murder weapon 3 times and 3 times only. I saw it the day Shane bought it, the day Zach used it to kill Holly, and the day Shane gave it back to Victor Densmore. Enter Victor Densmore. Victor Densmore hits the stand and says, yep, I got it back from Shane, and we were worried about it having a body on it, so my wife threw it in a puddle where we went and got it just a few weeks ago. It's the murder weapon. I wish I could make this shit up.
And it was a pistol first. Jason was saying that he saw Shane with a pistol.
Well, nobody
on his hip or something as part of the story.
Jason
just because
first story is it's a 357. Okay. Which
should we go back to the other slide?
No gun person would ever look at a small 32 frame revolver and think to themselves, well, that's a 357. It's also, and I mean, anecdotally, I don't. The story that Jason Autry told was that Shane had this thing in a holster on his hip. He was known to wear it all the time. I've been around guns and gun people for all my life. I've never seen anybody carry a 32 revolver in a holster outside the hip. Not once. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth. But so miraculously, just weeks before trial, the state has no murder weapon until the ever cooperative Mr. Dinsmore gives them one, which conveniently Jason Autry later says, "Oh yeah, yeah. Let me tell you how it got to Shane, to the murder scene, back to Shane, and then back to Victor Dinsmore, so that you can also believe his story about putting it in a puddle." It's absurd.
And it's weird because Jennifer Thompson asks a very simple question. So there's two Jennifers. Jennifer Nichols is trial prosecutor. Jennifer Thompson, attorney for Zachary Adams at trial. It's a lot of overlapping names here. She asked Jason Autry a very simple question. It looks the same? And Jason's just like, yep. Like, it's like, he's so set on remembering his story that he's not even paying attention to a question that an easy answer would be, well, yeah, it's just rusted, but I can still tell based on how it looks, it's still the same gun. He just says, yep, and won't even acknowledge that this is not what the gun looked like when
it's not, it's never
transaction.
no, but well, and even before Victor Dinsmore so helpfully comes forward with what they later claim as the murder weapon, Victor Dinsmore is recorded basically saying to the cops, "Y'all need a shotgun? I heard it might be a shotgun. Y'all need a shotgun? I done sold a shotgun to Shane." Or y'all need a different handgun? Oh, I know about a handgun. He's offering up basically anything they want him to say is the murder weapon until they settle on this revolver that his wife threw in a puddle that they now go and recover.
Well, and Autry never mentions that, like, Autry's just not, I'm assuming Autry's not aware, or he's not putting two and two together. He's not paying attention to anything in discovery about this casing.
The 380 casing never comes up. And if you read the Court of Appeals opinion, it's the one thing that's omitted from the scene of her. The Court of Criminal Appeals opinion has this long list of things that are recovered with Holly's remains, not including the 380 casing.
Okay, that was
if I told you that the remains of a missing girl are recovered with a deformity in the skull that is consistent with a 380 projectile, and there's a 380 casing near her skull.
Well, I think if I was a court of appeals and you leaned on the issue of, in closing, the trial prosecutor whispering to the jury very closely, excluded.
Yeah. Well, that's a problem. That's a problem that the post-conviction relief is pursuing, is that the prosecutor
was significant. It's not harmless.
An inaccurate statement at a minimum in closing. And
on a critical issue.
Here's what I don't understand, frankly. And if they're watching, okay, they still don't seem to understand this problem. They still don't seem to understand that there is a problem with what
they need to learn this. This impacts other prosecutions
and what the evidence now is.
Well, so I had to learn, and I appreciate, like, Sheriff Chuck is just one example, but in the chat, this clarification of why it's so important that this is an auto casing that's found, because revolvers
don't eject.
It took me, revolvers don't eject casings. So this could not have been left behind
and manually eject them.
So this wouldn't, if this is the murder weapon, then this wouldn't be the thing. So the state needs to ignore and put blinders on, or say that it's excluded, and dance around this casing being found right next to Holly's skull.
It's a problem, and I don't think they've ever figured out how to deal with it. It's one of many problems that I don't think the state can explain.
Even if they call boat guy who witnessed gunshot in 2011 and never said anything before, how are they going to explain this?
I know what I would ask that guy.
And then what did it sound like? Also, can he imitate the boom for us?
No, I assume he'll get that line right. If it were me and the state put that guy on to say, "Oh, I was there, I heard the gunshot down under the bridge at, 9-ish on April 13th, 2011, I think I would just look at him and say, "Where have you been?" Where have you been?
I've got, while we have this up, let's, the teeth. Holly Bobo's teeth.
Well, yeah, let's keep this in mind too. Um, if you want to believe the state's theory, it also includes this that
Remember the body transport story, guys. How we have
that's
to
right.
get the body from
Yeah,
where we think she's dead. We go to the bridge. We
we go
realize
all
she's
the way to the
not
river and
dead.
back, which is at least an hour round trip.
So the theory is she shot at this bridge
That's right.
in the back of the skull with the bullet exiting through the mouth.
There is no, and by the way, there's no, the truck is searched. There's no physical evidence to link any of these four men to Holly Bobo's, to the crimes committed against Holly Bobo. But so here's the other things you have to believe if you want to try to believe this story that the state has concocted. You have to believe that the perpetrators somehow decided to leave some, but not all, of her personal belongings at the scene of where they dumped her body. You have to believe that these people also discarded randomly across the route some of her identifiable personal belongings. And you also have to believe that none of those things happened around Zach's house, on the way to the river, on the way back from the river, or anywhere else. So I don't know. I don't plan a lot of murders. I think if I were planning a murder, or even if I hadn't planned it, but I was going to try to cover it up spontaneously, my guess
This
would
doesn't
be
even, panic doesn't even make this math.
my guess is that intuitively I would say the body, the belongings, the keys, the books, the phone, all this has to be found together or never. I'm not going to go flinging some of it out the window, leave some of it with her, and then somehow this whole go to the river and back yields no residue of her presence.
And while Jason Autry, according to his story, would also be an alert that we've been spotted, then you just go and like.
Well, you also, so if you want to believe the Victor Dinsmore portion of the story, you also have to believe this, okay? You also have to believe that having failed to discard the body at the river, they returned to Shane's home, where Jason Autry says, you know what, guys? I think I'm going to go have lunch with my girlfriend. So good luck with this problem. I'm out, okay? You have to believe that by 2
And
o'clock that
he was helping
afternoon,
moving this
yeah,
bloody
right.
body
That's right.
in and out of a truck, and then
That's right.
crawling through the woods to dispose of everything, because that's not like a, it's like
Well,
a dirt road to get to the area.
His version is that he left Holly's now for sure dead body in the truck with Zach and the other guys, and he went on his merry way to lunch. However, Jason Autry also testified that by 2 o'clock, he was calling Zach again, going, hey, man, I need some more dope. I realize you may or may not have gotten rid of this body that everyone's looking for yet, but I sure could use a hookup. And then rendezvoused with him and went to see Victor Dinsmore. Now, I don't know about you. Again, I'm not participating in a lot of murders, but if I got myself into and then out of this moment in time, you know who the
I'm gonna
one
go
person
hang out
I'm
with the
not
same
calling the
guy.
rest of the day is? The guy who I last saw with the body.
And then 2 days later, he's asking, because I think he said Friday, the Friday of, the same guy, Zachary Adams, is apparently asking Jason Autry, I need you to go kill Dylan, kill my brother. Right. And we're going to go out to we're going to go out to a waterway where we've apparently been spotted last time we shot someone near a waterway.
Yeah, you know where we should get rid of Dylan? You should take him fishing under the bridge.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. You also have to believe that having spent the night high, the morning kidnapping, raping, and murdering Holly Bobo and failing to discard of her body, and returning to Shane Austin's trailer before dropping the white truck off at Victor Dinsmore's barn, apparently with or without a body, who knows. You also have to believe that at that moment in time, with this morning of incredible failure behind you, you look at your buddies and you go, you know what we should do, guys? Tots and shakes. We should go to Sonic. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. What about you?
It
Like,
honestly all makes sense if you just take the drugs part and the food part and then take out all the other details, and you just have a day where somebody's doing drugs and they want food, and then that seems like a reasonable day. That seems like something I can imagine them all practically doing.
yes, you could alternatively believe that some drug addicts woke up and did drug addict stuff, which included wandering around the county, buying gas, going to Sonic, getting money out of an ATM, and doing the same thing the day before and the day after. You could believe that. You can't believe that and convict Zach, but you could believe that if you wanted to.
Well, no, what is the purpose? I know my theory, but I'll let you explain it. The purpose of Zach wanted me to kill Dylan, because that's, to me, that stems back to the discovery, and you need Dylan to be the chatterbox. You need to verify that Dylan was telling people things contemporaneously.
Yeah, so according to Jason Autry, a couple of days after Holly's murder, Zach
Dylan
gets a hold of according to Jason Autry, a couple days after Holly Bobo's murder, Zach gets a hold of Jason Autry and says, "Man, I got a problem. I got to get with you." He's like, "Okay, cool. Meet me at this crime scene, this marijuana field, where we'll have this conversation about whatever." And so I presume that Zach must have said, "Hey, Dylan, want to go for a ride? Cool, let's go for a ride." And so according to Autry, Zach and Dylan arrive together, and Zach apparently says to Dylan something like, "Wait in the truck. I got to talk to Autry about something." And goes to Autry and says, "Man, my little brother over there won't shut his mouth. He's running his mouth. We're all going to get in trouble. You need to kill him." Now, I've never had a brother, and I've never conspired to murder anyone. I think probably if I were going to conspire to murder someone, I wouldn't bring them to the meeting, but I don't know. But Jason Autry, apparently to his credit, says, "Man, if I do that, I'll probably have to kill you too." And Zach's like, apparently, "Well, one thing at a time." So apparently Jason convinces Dylan to go for a boat ride. Apparently Jason Autry is the only one who's ever seen The Godfather, because you shouldn't go for a boat ride if you're running your mouth too much about crimes you've committed, Fredo. So apparently they go for a boat ride, and Dylan's life is spared because while they're out on the boat ride, during which Jason Autry is supposed to murder Dylan, they happenstance in this vast lake to run across someone they know. And Jason Autry's like, "Well, damn it, now I can't kill him." So the plot to murder Dylan is foiled by the happenstance of yet another interloping boater.
What if they show up as a new witness? You get the two boater witnesses showing up.
I'm sorry if I mock this stuff. It's not because it's not serious. It's because
it's a ridiculous story that doesn't fit.
It's like I keep waiting for Alan Funt to pop in and be like, "Gotcha."
Well, my theory on it is the state knows that, and Jason Autry knows he knows it differently from the state. You can see that if you go and watch his recanting video. He talks about it. But they both know, the state knows and Jason Autry knows, that Dylan Adams was the crux of getting these indictments to where they were in this time between the remains being found, or really before the remains being found, but 2014 through to the 2017 trial. But the state realizes that they can't call Dylan as a witness. They have very problematic recorded interviews where Brent Booth and Jeff Jackson are, after holding.
Oh, wait. We
want to talk about how we got to this interview?
Yes, let's.
Yeah, let's do the timeline. This is why this is helpful.
Yeah, so a minute ago, I was telling you about Dennis Benjamin, the retired Memphis cop, who went and tuned up the witness who eventually, I mean, in my opinion, if you watch this trial, two men convicted Zach Adams, Jason Autry and Victor Dinsmore. You can take all the snitches away. I don't think if you take the snitches away, the verdict's any different. If you take Jason Autry out of the equation,
the state wanted the snitches because they were well aware that they didn't want a sufficiency of the evidence challenge if there was a credibility attack on Jason. So they have all these other jailhouse snitches to somehow beef the record. Yeah, I think that's all it was.
So you can take the snitches out of the original trial. I don't think it changes the outcome. If you take Jason Autry out of the original trial, there is no trial. If you take Victor Dinsmore out of the original trial, probably still a conviction, but not quite as tight, right? So Dennis Benjamin, having been recruited into this thing apparently by Van Hooser and cut loose on this community, seemingly to do things that the TBI shouldn't, Victor Dinsmore, Dennis Benjamin goes and tunes up Victor Dinsmore.
Well, let's clarify that. So they keep each other at arm's length. So at these post-conviction hearings, TBI, the prosecutors, they don't want to say that they were getting information or giving information to Dennis Benjamin. They're like, no.
Oh, okay.
Dennis Benjamin, the most he wants to say is, well, maybe if it was something important, I would have told them.
Right.
Other than that, he's working as a private investigator.
While tuning Victor Dinsmore up, he offered to call Jack Van Hooser or Karen Bobo, whichever one Dinsmore needed to hear it from. So whatever. So aside from being incredibly helpful with recruiting Victor Dinsmore's truthful testimony, Dylan Adams, Zach's little brother, was in federal custody on some gun charges.
How did was there a phone call? And was Brent Booth relevant at this point in time?
Apparently, while Dylan and his friend Jason Kilzer, were in custody with some federal gun charges that would have jammed them up pretty good. Apparently, Booth gets a call from Jason Kilzer's mother, who provides this story where she says
6 to 7 months ago,
Dylan Adams was sitting on my couch and confessed what he knew, that his brother and Jason Autry had been involved in the disappearance and murder of Holly Bobo. And Brent Booth's like, damn, great story. Let's work with that. So Dylan
January 2014.
Yeah. So Dylan gets jammed up on some federal gun charges. And I would love to tell you more about those, but they're all sealed. I have Pacer. As a lawyer, I have access to online dockets. Not these. These are sealed. Can't know what's in them. But we do know this. Dylan Adams is given the opportunity to resolve these very serious federal gun charges with time served and some probation. But in another thing that I've never seen happen in the history of my 33 years.
This is how I heard about this case on November 19th.
Dylan Adams, a grown man, is told you can leave prison on probation, but you have to go live with Dennis Benjamin. Now, of course, Dennis Benjamin and Dylan Adams at this point are long time acquaintances, of course, right? No, they've never met. But Dennis Benjamin is currently working for the Bobo family and the TBI on this investigation. And for reasons that we don't know and will never be able to get probably, Dennis Benjamin becomes the legal condition of probation custodian of Dylan Adams. Dennis Benjamin takes Dylan Adams home to his wife and children, and 5 weeks later calls his friends at the TBI and says, Dylan Adams just confessed to the murder of Holly Bobo. He knows everything. I'll bring him right in.
Well, wait, don't they find something very important in between that time frame?
Oh yeah, a week before that, Holly Bobo's remains are discovered.
So
Now
about
they got a
4
body.
weeks,
Yep.
Dennis Benjamin has Dylan in his custody. They find the skull.
They've never met. They meet the day before Dylan is pleading and discharged by law to go live with Dennis Benjamin. So Dylan, who has documented intellectual deficits, is ordered, you want to get out of jail? Go live with Dennis Benjamin. Dennis Benjamin takes him home to his wife and kids, takes him to family events, and about 5 weeks later calls his buddies at the TBI and says, hey guys, good news. I cracked the case. I'll bring him right in. He knows everything. Stay put. So Dennis Benjamin takes Dylan Adams down to the TBI Jackson office, turns over some notes that he took from the alleged confession, and then, my understanding, sits with some agents on the other side of the one-way glass and watches for 4.5 hours while Brent Booth and Jeff Jackson attempt to get Dylan Adams to recite the story that he supposedly just told to Dennis Benjamin about his role in the murder of Holly Bobo. And he can't. It is the most painful thing I have seen in this case yet. To watch Dylan Adams attempt to remember what he's been told to say, and he can't. And Jeff Jackson
they can only tell him what to say because they know Holly's dead and that there was a bullet wound. So
to watch Jeff Jackson become increasingly furious with Dylan, as Dylan can't remember his lines, and bang on the table and yell at him and, damn it, Dylan, that ain't what happened and you know it and we're not going to waste our time. And somebody calls Jeff Jackson out of this interview, and Jeff Jackson comes back in and he's like, all right, Dylan, listen, we've wasted enough time. It's late. I'm ready to go home. I need you to get this right. Tell me what happened. Well, Dylan, by this time, to me, looks incredibly, he's exhausted. He's emotionally drained. He doesn't know which way's up. And Dylan, now, in addition to finally repeating back what he's been told again, now Dylan throws out a couple other things that you can just see how Jeff Jackson gets irate. Dylan says, oh yeah, that happened in the basement. And you can just see on Jeff Jackson's face, basement? Now they got a crime scene that they've never heard about before that they got to go find, apparently. And then Dylan says, and you guys already have the gun. And Jeff Jackson practically throws his pad over his shoulder. He's like, you're telling me we got the murder weapon? And Dylan's like, yeah, y'all picked it up a long time ago. Now, in this alleged confession, and let me just say this. I want to say this too. I've met Cindy Adams, the mother of Dylan and Shane. She too is a victim here because if you say salt of the earth, this is her. This woman has welcomed me into her home, fed me, told me, answered any question I had for her, stood resolutely by her sons, knowing they didn't do this. Karen Bobo is not the only mother whose child was taken from them unjustly. And so I give Cindy Adams a lot of credit for having the strength to bear up through all of this insanity. Okay. By the way, I've met Rita Austin, Shane Austin's mother and father.
I was going to say,
Jimmy.
There's a Shane Austin detail here that happens before Dennis Benjamin, Dylan living with Dennis Benjamin, and these weird interviews. We hear Rita Austin. Rita Austin is mother of Shane Austin. Shane Austin had an immunity deal offered, but they wanted Shane Austin to point out where the remains would be.
And he couldn't, so they pulled it. So, and Rita and Jimmy have been to nearly every hearing from the beginning. They too want their son posthumously exonerated
Clear
because
his
he didn't have
name.
anything to do with this either. So the tragedy in this case begins with Holly Bobo's abduction and death. It does not end there. It does not end with the Bobo family, and they may not be happy to hear that. But I'm sorry. The Austin family was shattered. The Adams family shattered. There are mothers of sons who have lost their son or lost their son to prison unjustly. And so part of what animates me in this is knowing that at a minimum, this trial was not fair. At a minimum. So and Shane Austin was driven to his own death before any trial for him. So now let me get. So I feel awful for every mother whose child has been negatively impacted in this case, because what's happened here is wrong. Now let me get back to Dennis Benjamin. So Dennis Benjamin brings Dylan to the police department, and Dylan tries very hard to repeat the story he's been told, and eventually is able to figure out that what he's supposed to tell them is that his brother and Jason Autry and him and Shane all participated in the abduction and rape and eventual murder of Holly Bobo. Here's a problem with that. The state never once attempted to advance the theory of Dylan's confession. Not a single thing in Dylan's confession makes it to the trial of Zach Adams, except that Zach Adams is supposed to be involved in the disappearance and death of Holly Bobo. The details shift from Dylan Adams' so-called confession, wherein Jason Autry is the ringleader, compelling the other men to participate, to Jason Autry gets on the stand and says, I just showed up wanting dope and found out I was in the middle of it and then got out of it. When the state heard,
went from death penalty to time served.
So when Dylan Adams' story is told to the state, they go out and try to prove it. Of course. Good police work, right? I mean, this interview is a horrendous example of it. The interview of Dylan Adams should be shown to every police officer in training as what not to do. But they did it. They go out and try to prove it. This is when they go do the search warrant and tear up everything at Zach Adams' house, attempting to prove that Holly Bobo had been there and been raped to the point of being bloody. Nothing.
I'm so bothered by the media coverage about this. So there's been no action in this case for like months, like over a year. There's like no substantive action. And then all of a sudden there's a press conference like February 28th where TBI director Mark Gwynn is doing this press conference and saying that there's been search warrants issued in relation to the Holly Bobo case. And then a few days later, we're finding out that there's indictments coming down and there's reports that they've done searches at Zach Adams' home and they're in the yard excavating things. They find bone fragments. And now any person listening to that coverage, when you have a gap in time of 2 years and you hear they do these searches and then immediately they're indicting somebody and they excavated bones, why wouldn't you? It's hard not to conclude. It would be a reach not to conclude they found physical evidence. And in 2025, we know that's not true. They found no physical evidence.
Do you know when Brent Booth was asked at the post-conviction relief, what physical evidence do you have to connect Zach Adams to the disappearance of Holly Bobo? Do you know what he said?
Is this where he started to say there was lots of evidence but couldn't say anything specifically?
He talked about a bottle of fingernail polish that was consistent.
Oh, the nail polish.
Yeah. So
typical man.
Well, I guess what that
Well,
means
there's
is
an
that a
issue. It's not
grown
the same.
no, they made no effort to connect that it was the same. It was consistent. Is the best. Like what a
Like
reach.
fuchsia versus mauve, or
It's fingernail
red and
polish. A woman has
magenta.
been there.
And we have Rebecca Earp still in and out of the property at this point in time.
Of course, it was hers.
Like,
It was some. You know whose it wasn't? Holly Bobo's. If for one second, just again, indulge me for a moment. If you want to believe that Brent Booth's testimony that they found a bottle of fingernail polish or some remnant of fingernail polish that was the same as Holly's, then you also have to believe that somehow these guys got Holly Bobo in and out of that house and cleaned up her existence completely, except for that.
well, it doesn't make sense that, like, if like keys, a card, that's something that I would expect someone might have in their pockets, even if they're carrying a purse or a lunchbox. They might have certain things in their pockets. Cell phone. It makes a little bit of sense why there'd be some things right where her remains were found that would fall out of pockets, or she'd be like holding on to tightly because it's important, and other stuff's left in the car. I would imagine that if she's carrying nail polish with her for a quick touch-up, that's probably in a bag that is not in her pocket. She's not putting the nail polish in her pockets.
It wasn't.
Do they bring the lunch pail in the house to do these activities?
Do they commit kidnapping, rape, and murder, with some of it happening at the property on your screen, and clean it all up adequately, forgetting about only this nail polish that is not the same kind? It's generically the same color. Like, it would, frankly, if I'd have been Brent Booth, I think I'd have just said, no, we don't have any physical evidence such as you're talking about. I mean, but actually his first answer was, what do you mean by evidence? Okay.
Yeah. What do you mean defied evidence? Tell us about your experience again. How long before you retired you did this line of work, and you want us to define evidence for you? Crazy. I always love when people are stumped on the stand because they say stupid things like that to buy time.
You know, here's another. I don't know if this has been made clear. I've watched this very closely. I've had access to things, and I know things that I'm not gonna say. Okay.
I still think we're not only are we at new trial territory for 7 different reasons, but and for some of those reasons, it's like ineffective assistance of counsel argument and prosecutor issues all in one about one issue. But I'm also at actual innocence. And we haven't even spoken about the final nail in the coffin on the alibi.
Well, let me say this before we do that, okay?
Yeah.
So Doug Bates and Crystal E2, both of whom I knew before this started.
Crystal E2, guys, is the woman we've seen with the nice hair sitting next to Zach at the proceedings.
Yeah. So I've known both of them for a long time. I have great respect for them. What they have done is try this post-conviction relief case with nothing other than the evidence that was on the hard drive the day before the trial started.
Oh, that makes Doug's comment about, I have all of it. I forget when he said it.
The only thing that has been offered into evidence in this trial that wasn't in existence and on the hard drive when the trial started was not admitted. It's the Jason Autry recant. Every other piece of paper, every other statement, every other everything was on the hard drive in discovery when this trial started in 2017. And I want to make that point because it goes to show you a couple of things. Regrettably, it goes to show you that Jennifer Thompson could have done this very differently and better and that her performance here was deficient in a constitutional way. Okay. But it is not entirely her fault, not at all, because a great deal of what Doug has unearthed, Dr. Spirko helped, was buried in what I'll call a data dump. The state of Tennessee turned over terabytes of information. And in many cases, it was not labeled, mislabeled, randomly located, and essentially produced in a way that was constitutionally deficient. And there's the prosecutorial misconduct.
Yeah,
But
so it's 2 points of error,
when
2
you take
angles.
all of it and you add it all up, there are a few anchors that cannot be disputed that go to show you there's actual innocence here. And that is, nobody can explain how Johnny Walker's map that we started with doesn't explain where Holly's phone went and doesn't explain where Holly went, and make that work with Jason Autry and Victor Densmore's trial testimony. And then you add the ATM photo that the state went out of their way to bury. And something rotten, something stinks.
I think there's some critical details here.
This is not an oopsie.
This to me is, and this ATM video footage, the first few streams I did on this trial, there were people that were coming in, but he said bad things. He did it. He's a monster. And it's like, I understand why people watching the news coverage, even watching the trial, would hold that opinion. But when it came to these ATM surveillance footage video pieces, there's different aspects of it. And when we would hear the state argue, because we didn't get to hear what happened in January, oh, it's too pixelated, you can't see anybody in it. So I can see why somebody would be like, okay, that's not enough.
But wait. The state confiscated that truck. That truck in that photo, the state picked it up. And I've never. And by the way, last year, maybe the year before. No, year before, when Dr. Spirko got on this thing, she relentlessly tried to get this ATM footage because Zach told her adamantly, we went to the ATM. That ATM's gotta have a picture and it'll help. It'll prove where we were. So Dr. Spirko starts going to try to find it.
Well, there's a detail that Zach says that's very peculiar.
It's backward. Yeah.
You drive backwards through the ATM.
Yep. So Dr. Spirko starts looking for this ATM footage, right? Now, at the time, no one knew it was on the hard drive because it was buried and mislabeled and part of a data dump of misnamed, put in the wrong place. And there's an investigative report that says we don't have any camera footage from the ATM or the area. Okay. So the state has affirmatively put in writing that there's no such footage. Jennifer Thompson at the time issues subpoenas and is told we don't have any such cameras. All the while, it's lurking it's lurking on a hard drive, and the state has seen it. The state knows they have it. Okay,
well, they can open it,
and they could open it. So now, when Dr. Spirko starts looking for it, none of us are aware that it's on the hard drive. None of us know that it's in hand. We're thinking maybe this ATM machine can be found, and maybe the recording device can be recovered. And maybe if the recording device can be recovered, some expert can unarchive backwards in time and get it. It's a long shot, but it's worth looking for. Dr. Spirko relentlessly pursues this and finds a guy who says, yeah, that ATM machine is in a storage unit. We took it out of service, but it's here. Dr. Spirko tells Doug Bates, you got to get it. Doug Bates calls Jennifer Nichols and says, hey, we found the ATM machine and wanted to give you a heads up because, of course, we're all going to be interested to see if we can get a hold of it and get what's ever on it, right?
Can you pinpoint this time frame? Like, as you move
This was
forward, tell us the day-to-day difference in time as the next steps of the story proceed.
all right. I'm trying to
So,
remember. This is 2024.
well, so Doug puts Nichols on alert. So
Doug
prosecutor
puts Nichols on
Nichols
alert. That's right.
is on alert.
Because they have agreed that as they go through this, they will cooperate with one another and they don't want to just ambush each other with subpoenas and so forth. So it's May of 2024. Katie finds a guy who says, yeah, it's here. Dr. Spirko finds this guy. He says, yes, the machine's here. I don't know if it's any good, but you can get it. Doug calls Jennifer Nichols and says, miracle of miracles, machine's been found. Jennifer Nichols and Kathy Ferguson have a meeting and they issue a subpoena, not in the courthouse in Savannah. They issue an administrative subpoena secretly out of the Nashville TBI office, and they send some dudes down and they pick up the machine and they have the bank officer sign a form that says, I won't tell anyone you were here. I won't disclose. It's a secret. They pick up the machine and they take it away. Now, all the while, Doug is banging on about, got to get the machine. Please let me have the machine. The way that the defense finds out that that picture on your screen exists is sitting in a courtroom at a preliminary hearing in this case, not technically a preliminary hearing, but a hearing early in the matter before the proof opens, when Doug is still attempting to accumulate the evidence. And one of the prosecutors walks up to the podium with that photo on his screen. And Zach sees it and yanks on Doug's coat. I'm sitting 10 feet from him when this happens. Yanks on Doug's coat and goes, that's it. That's us. Doug's like, what? That's us.
My
That's
truck.
the truck.
It
took months more until the state finally admitted that they had it. It was the night before a hearing. And the state sent a response that said, what are you talking about? Everybody's got this. This isn't a big secret. And literally did a point and click showing screenshots of where to find it. And to this day, they have that machine sequestered somewhere. Now, I admit I'm a little cynical. All right? I admit it.
I'll say it. This sounds like prosecutorial misconduct and they're scared and
yeah, I'll go a little
I'll
further.
say it.
Look at those pictures. It's still images of a truck passing through a machine. Now, it's also going through backwards, which is what Zach said they did because Shane Austin was in the passenger seat and Shane Austin is the one who had the ATM card and they didn't want to have to hand the card around and do a lean over, whatever. So Zach pulled Shane Austin up in the passenger window so he could get the money out because he's the one who had the money to buy the drugs. And this is timestamped at 11:12 a.m., which is part of the reason I know it's impossible to do Jason Autry's timeline. Okay.
Yeah, because can I show the map one time real quick?
Yeah.
Let's let me get back. Oh, wrong window. Let me pull up the big Google map because
now
I think this is missing from.
What do you think? What would you expect to find if you got an ATM video in connection with a criminal investigation?
Transactions.
What does
a
bank
physical
want
device?
Security footage of?
Who's going through it?
The
License
face
plates?
of the person using it.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's other angles on the.
Did I lose? I can't hear you now.
Oh, it might be me. Hold on. Let me.
Ruh-roh.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
StreamYard, that's the fourth time this week that this happened with StreamYard, with window changing. It's kicking stuff out. So sorry about that, guys. I'm back.
Okay, so what I was
just a little bloop.
yeah, so what I was saying is I'm cynical enough to wonder why is what the state's turned over. Why does it not include any pictures of anyone's face?
And
Because
it's only
only
and they
still
have the
pictures of
device.
vehicles. It's only still pictures of vehicles going through.
Holy moly. What the heck?
I mean, I just always assumed because we've all seen countless news stories and whatever. Like when the bad guy uses the ATM.
DVD? What does DVD mean? It's not still images. I mean, a movie might be frames put together, but they're in motion. It's video.
Well, this was 2011. I get that the technology was a little, not what we think it is today and all that.
But it wouldn't just be two still frames. Are you saying that the only thing that they turned over was still frames?
Mm-hmm.
So, two.
Well, they turned over a whole string of them. These are the only two that capture this particular truck. By the way,
okay.
Every other vehicle that goes through that ATM goes the other way.
So that you can say like, hey, this is the based on the direction of the front window, you can tell that it's going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Or everybody else would have to be going backwards, and that's the only car going forward.
Right. Either they're the only one going through correctly, or everyone else went through backwards. But I just have always been struck by the fact that the machine's still sitting there, and the only thing anyone else has is what the state lifted from it and gave. For some reason, this ATM doesn't have a single picture of a face of anyone that used it.
Yeah, and this makes more sense because we were able to watch Doug's opening statements in May. And I think we watched some of the November stuff, and then we went back to May because that was the earliest stuff we could find. But there was something that Doug was mentioning about it's only a portion, which I'm assuming is the string of the still images. And he was hinting at this, and I didn't really get it. I thought maybe we were only seeing on the screen because they weren't showing the full video. They weren't letting it play in court. But now I kind of get that they want to see what's on the device if there's more than just what they've been provided. But the device is sequestered.
That the TBI secretly sent people to pick up and sequestered.
As soon as they found out
as soon as they
that
knew
Doug was looking
Dr.
for
Spirko had found it and that Doug was going to issue a subpoena for it, they issued a subpoena out of the TBI administrative office, which means
Can you explain like on 5 that? So the different subpoena powers compare like a defense attorney versus what?
So if I go issue a subpoena in a criminal case, I don't have administrative subpoena power. If I want to issue a subpoena, I have to write a letter to the clerk that says, please issue a subpoena for the following thing: ATM machine from this location, blah, 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 right? And then the clerk issues that subpoena and it gets served in some way, okay? But the state is contemporaneously aware of my request to issue the subpoena. The state of Tennessee, in this case, used a secret subpoena out of their administrative office under the premise that they were investigating some separate crime to pick up this ATM machine and not tell anyone. They didn't admit that they had picked up the machine for months. And they only admitted it when they were going to have to answer some questions in court the next day. And Judge Bradbury sat on the bench flipping around in the court file going, subpoena? I don't see a subpoena. Oh, well, see, what had happened was we issued it an administrative subpoena out of our office. And Judge Bradbury said, you mean you didn't ask my clerk to issue a subpoena from this case out of this courthouse?
Because Judge Bradbury, if this is like your first time diving into this case, Judge Bradbury is the post-conviction relief hearing judge.
Right.
He's sitting there. This is still happening. This type of proceeding under a quorum nobis is at the trial court. You're asking the trial court, hey, correct this error that happened under your roof. But the trial judge retired. So now this is in Judge Bradbury's hands, and it's night and day. If you were to watch the original trial and then watch the judge of these proceedings, this judge is paying attention to the record. I would say even the way these hearings have been structured, he spaced these hearings out. These are evidentiary hearings for each side to present.
I'm going to say this too. Man, I've been impressed with Judge Bradbury. Um, Judge Bradbury has been measured and calm and thorough and prepared. And I don't have the foggiest idea how he's going to rule. I mean, he's a bit of a sphinx, honestly. He doesn't give away much um, in his demeanor or his words or anything like that. I don't know, frankly, whether I would be a welcome lawyer in his courtroom or whether he thinks I'm unhinged and a pain in the ass. I don't know. I'll say this. I would be glad to practice in front of him all the time. He's been so incredibly fair in this case. I say all that to say this. Um, I'm not sure anyone knew where this case was going to go. And I think in retrospect, it might be true that if he'd known it was going to be like this, he might have said, I'm giving you 15 days in a row and we're getting it over with and we're getting it done. So clear your decks and let's go. Because
he mentioned something to the effect of needing time to go through the transcript. So I was really thinking he's actually going to look at the record. There's times where I think judges just hear what they hear in court, and even if they're looking at something that happened where they weren't presiding over it, they just assume moving forward they're just going to look at whatever is presented to them in a motion or argued orally in court.
you know, I've wrestled with this case now for at least 18 months, at least. And I guess I would admit that I know more about this case than all but a small number of people. Um, I can't imagine having to try all the other cases that are going on in front of him, all the while he's trying to get up to speed on this. So I can't say he's been so fair. I mean, as much
He's
as
sharp.
I hate it,
He volunteers the exhibit. That's like what we're going to number this.
Yeah.
What's coming up. What date was just said.
I even think he got the Jason Autry recant video right under the rules as they exist. I mean, I hate that
he'd have to come in, and that's not going to happen.
I mean, as a lawyer watching that, I thought, he's probably right.
I think the Jason Autry thing is most important for public perception, and I don't mean that in a steer the public. I mean that in there was such a strong public conviction when this was all happening.
Yeah.
That for there to be news of somebody recanting, and that doesn't mean anything, because people could just say, well, maybe he's telling the truth now because he thinks he's going to get out soon and doesn't want to be in trouble because he snitched on somebody.
He's not getting out anytime soon.
But people can try to walk themselves away. Recanting doesn't always mean that the recanting is truthful. So people can reason away from that. But
yeah, well, I understand why the community, especially the local community, had a year and a half ago, such a hardened conviction that, of course, Zach did it. They don't want to entertain the idea that this went wrong either. I mean, like, what that means if Zach didn't do it,
person's free.
All this time, they've all been at risk, unless, of course, the person that did it happened to be in prison on some other charge or had somehow died along the way or something. It's, people.
Well, and I pinned this earlier, and I think this relates to what you're saying. So Peter had said, my question about this whole case is why were so many people without legal authority getting involved in the investigation? The community at large was out there, boots on the ground, literal boots on the ground, searching. Yeah. It's an emotional investment.
I think if by that question they mean, say, Dennis Benjamin or Karen Bobo or others, I mean, a girl disappeared, and whoever did it is a bad guy. And, if your choices are wait around for someone else to solve it, especially if it's your daughter, or go do whatever you can, I mean, I get it. Karen Bobo has said repeatedly, there's nothing I wouldn't have done more. I mean, I'll paraphrase. There's nothing I wouldn't have done to help find my daughter or bring her killer to justice. I don't blame her.
Yep.
I don't blame her. I don't expect her to sit on the couch and wait to be told what happened. So this, I don't know. Kat, what else you want? What else
So
do you?
I think there's some loose ends on this alibi story, and what I think is so interesting is we're in a situation where the way the state's acting about this information, they sound like a defense attorney that's trying to cast reasonable doubt, even the slightest bit of reasonable doubt on how this doesn't fully, completely 100% alibi somebody. And it's a very weird shift. It's something you'd expect from a defense attorney, but you've got it's not just that this vehicle's there, because the state's going to try to say, well, we don't know that Zach was actually in the vehicle. Well, and his
They
phone
have
also puts him
literally
there.
said, they have literally said, so what? It's a silver Silverado. You can't tell who's in it. And they said that they started asking that question once this image came into evidence. The state started asking every witness, "Can you see who's in the truck?" And finally, Judge Bradbury said, "Listen, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm making a finding. You can't. You cannot see who's in the truck. So move on."
But guess what else? You have the phone. You have, and I don't know, has
Well,
this picture of Dylan played a role
oh yeah, that's been too. That's been, listen,
in the
Dylan
record, in the
came.
trial?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, no,
He's
no, this, okay, let's separate
in
which
the
one we're talking about.
post-conviction proceeding. I'm
In
sorry.
the post-conviction relief, this picture of Dylan at the convenience store was introduced in court for the first time because it too was discovered buried and mislabeled. So,
And
so
like
Dylan,
that's dead ringer. I know it is actually blurry. I will not
well,
dispute that it's
even if
blurry,
you
but
had any
that's his
doubt,
head shape.
Dylan got on the stand and said, "That's me."
Yep.
And this one, and there's another one where you can see the truck driving around. You can see, I think there's one where you can tell that they're, um, um, and by the way, it was Dylan's mother who saw this image and said, "That's my boy. That's Dylan." It was
Shout
Dylan
out
who
to
later
Cindy.
corroborated that. But you can't just call Dylan up on the phone and go, "Hey man, I got a picture. I need to know if it's you." But I'll tell
I
you what,
mean,
a mother's ID, I'll take it.
I'm not suggesting that that's what should be done, but I have a feeling that I'm thinking of a certain Brent Booth recording with Victor Dinsmore of, hey, this is what's going to be testified to. I need you to help me.
Yeah,
But
so I've been paying a little bit of attention. There's a couple of questions. If you don't mind, I'll
yeah, let's do it.
that'll come. Okay, so one was who is left on the PCR witness list. The status of the situation now is that
6.
Doug Bates and Crystal E2 have rested their case. The state has said that there are 6 witnesses that they intend to call, and I believe they think they might get it done in a day or two. I don't know yet if the state has identified who those 6 witnesses are. We'll see. I think I can make a guess at who among the 6 it might be. I think the state is going to call their cell phone expert Frizzell to opine on what this cell phone data does or doesn't mean. Seems
Wouldn't Doug
likely.
have a field day with that?
We'll see. I think they're probably going to call the guy who now says he was under the bridge in the boat 14 years later. And I think they have listed Burton Staggs previously as a witness. The Burton is a local guy who runs a webpage with a lot of followers who has told me that he believes that what he thinks he's going to be called to testify to is that after the trial, he asked Jennifer Thompson, "What do you think?" To which she supposedly said, "Well, he told everyone he did it. What was I supposed to do?" So Burton's been under subpoena from the beginning. I don't know if they'll, I mean, I guess that's why they might call him. But that
The Zach
leaves,
stupid mouth folder.
yeah, that probably leaves 3 witnesses that the state, as far as I know, may not have identified yet.
I
I
don't,
don't.
doesn't, that might go to a, even the defense attorney says the evidence was sufficient for a conviction, but doesn't that also then get you into a catch-22 on, you have, I don't know, that just seems kind of weird.
Yeah.
It
The
seems like
other,
it seems like in a concession of ineffective assistance of counsel because you didn't push
they're in a
back on those
bind.
issues at
I mean, they're in a
trial.
real bind here, in my opinion. The other question that was brought up was people were either commenting or wondering, what do you mean he was too dangerous to bring to court or to trial? Um,
Oh, Jason
when
Autry.
Jason Autry's recant video surfaced, the state was apoplectic about the danger that it presented to transport him as a witness to testify live, because Judge Bradbury made it very clear, I want that man in court. Um, and the state went on and on about how terribly dangerous it would be for him to be brought to the courthouse. I guess Jason Autry got a lot more dangerous since 2017 when they brought him to the courthouse and let him wander around and talk, and testify without being restrained. So maybe they know something I don't know about how dangerous he is now versus then. But I've kind of mocked the idea that Jason Autry, this guy that they couldn't do without when they needed him. Now they can't possibly be bothered to bring him. He's in federal custody and we don't even know how to get him, and he's dangerous and yada, yada, yada. So,
And we also don't know how to bring important complaining witnesses, Tequila Jones, to trial when we need, there's always going to be an excuse, it seems like, years apart.
yeah. Um, um, so, let's see what else is out there.
I have one. Do you have an indication? This was in a ton of the footage for the news media. Is this just
Uh,
like B-roll or is this something actually relevant?
that does not ring a bell with me. That, um, they searched pretty much every standing structure in several counties. I think this is probably just some B there. I don't see any crime scene tape, so they must not have thought it was much. But
Yeah, it's just something that the news kept filling. It'd be that they'd go to the excavating at Zach's land, and it'd pan
they
back
dug
and forth.
holes. They searched every standing structure in several counties. I don't think this is the barn where the rape allegedly happened. By the way, that barn was subsequently um, dismantled, although the wood remains. And
I
I'm
would say
told,
this doesn't
I'm
look
told,
functionally like a
no,
where
that looks
you
like an
wouldn't
old
have this.
sharecropper. That looks like an old sharecropper house. But I'm told that the TBI never once actually searched that corn crib barn where the rape allegedly happened.
Uh,
So,
any more information? Because we just saw a brief little bit of Valerie Trout. I think it felt like 30 minutes, maybe even less, of Valerie Trout. And I don't know if she spoke more or what, but it seemed
um,
she was
you
in and
know,
out.
uh, Valerie Trout has no love lost with some of her former colleagues. That much was made clear. Um, she was not a big fan of some of them.
Any awareness of jurors from the trial that have said anything, and or I'll take some creative licensing with this question, jury questions during deliberations?
I do not know of any contact with any of the trial jurors that has been um, revealed in this post-conviction relief hearing.
Cool beans. I was wondering, I heard a rumor that perhaps it was a jury question where they were concerned about coming back with a conviction on the rape, and it seemed like questions of evidence that support that. And if that is a question, I think that's an interesting question to ask because I kind of have the same question.
I watched that whole trial more than once, and as far as I can tell, the only evidence to support the rape conviction was Jason Autry's gratuitous remarks about it, and then Victor Densmore's. They was arguing about who was going to hit it first.
Well, and the yelling about the pink panties, that blew my mind. And all these little things I forget until I think of them again. The pink panties drove me nuts. It was mentioned like 4 times by witnesses at the state called just to find out these pink panties that are found near Shane Austin's home on the road.
Had nothing to do with it.
They're not Holly's.
Nope.
But how inflammatory is that? Just crazy. So, also major love, and I'm going to go through and appropriately thank everybody, but major love to Sheriff Chuck dropping gifts in the chat, making sure everybody turns green.
So,
big love here.
Well, here's where we go from here. So there's at least there are 2 days scheduled at the end of December. There's 2 or 3 more scheduled in January. It's my understanding that they all hope to wrap up in December.
I think it's the judge's hope.
Yeah. Following that, Judge Bradbury will at some point issue a written opinion. There will not there won't be a decision announced from the bench at the end of the hearing. Judge Bradbury will issue a written opinion. It'll say whatever it says. Whoever doesn't like it is almost certainly going to appeal it.
Yeah.
And I do want to say that, Judge Bradbury's options here are sometimes misunderstood. Judge Bradbury can either vacate this conviction and set Zach where he was before the trial or not. This is not a case where the sentence has been challenged in this post-conviction relief. Judge Bradbury he can't grant a new trial. He can only vacate the conviction and give the state the opportunity to press for it, but to pursue a new trial. None of a new trial would not occur unless and until an appeal is complete, and the outcome of that appeal is that leaves open that Zach's conviction has been vacated, and if the state chooses to pursue a new trial, they can. So if there is ever a new trial, it's going to be many months from now.
Do you think they would go, and this is just a total guess, but do you think fighting for bond would be on the table and we'd get a bond hearing? And
my understanding from looking at this is that if the judge vacates the conviction, that Zach certainly would have the opportunity to request it, although I'm not sure that Zach could ever make the bond that might be set. So realistically, Zach might be sitting in jail for a while, even if Judge Bradbury is convinced that the conviction should be set aside. Now,
it takes a scenic route. Justice takes a scenic route, is the saying.
Yeah, through hell. At
100 miles per hour to get to Parsons in time.
Right. So, I'll say this. I think that I think this post-conviction relief hearing has been conducted really well by Doug and Crystal. I think Judge Bradbury has been very fair. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm obviously invested. This is one of those things that, as someone who's been doing this for 3 decades, when the moment, when this came across my radar and I saw what had happened here, I hated this. I mean, selfishly, I hated this feeling, but I was like, damn it. This is not something I can look away from. Like a lot of people would, I've talked to a lot of lawyers. I've tried to, I've had reason to go and talk to lawyers about whether or not they might want to get involved. And, there's a lot of lawyers that are like, oh man, I don't have the time. I don't have the, I can't commit those kind of resources, et cetera, et cetera. And, everybody's got to make their own choices, but, my contribution to what I consider to be a miscarriage of justice has been the podcast and doing things like this. And I appreciate your interest in this, and I appreciate your coverage of this tragedy. Um, and look forward to maybe coming back on and following up with what happens next.
Hey, we've got 350 people across the channels here tuning in. I think that number, I think people are used to seeing me live in the morning, and I only gave them notice yesterday about this. So I'm assuming we're going to have a ton of people on replay crew. You guys have broken it down so well over on the Trial and Error podcast. And after I say a little bit more, I want you to talk about season 2 a little bit. Plug what you're going to be doing over there. But I've seen interest in this case growing. I think the obstacle there is it's hard to figure out how to start digesting it. And my first place I would point anybody to is going to be starting with episode 1 of Trial and Error podcast.
Yeah,
So
that's the one we
just
take John Walker to the scene.
Yep, and just you'll just keep auto playing. Once you play that, it's the Pringles thing. You're gonna keep going. I have no doubt.
Yep.
As soon as you play episode 1, you're gonna keep
Oh
going, and
Lord,
it'll
someone
start to
asked
make
if I would
sense.
be Zach's attorney if there was a second trial.
Wouldn't you want to just have the opportunity to cross some of these witnesses on some of these issues? I know you've sat there and thought about it, like role played in your head.
I'll tell you what. If Zach's conviction is set aside and there is a second trial, if Bates is in, I'll do it.
Oh my God! So we would have a Dana, Doug, and Crystal, I would assume.
Oh, for sure.
And Kinley, the intern, maybe as like an intern in a different way.
Kinsey might be in law school by
Kinsey,
then.
why do I keep getting her name wrong? I'm so sorry.
Kinsey,
I'm so sorry,
Kinsey might have a law license by then. My son might have a law license by then. So
she says, "Let's go."
Let's go.
Love it. Well, this is my favorite type of
Doug
thing
will be
to
mad
hear.
I said that, but
totally. I think you've done great work just for the podcast. Like if that was all you did for this, you've already moved mountains. And I know you're going to say thanks to the GOAT, Dr. Katie Spirko.
None of this happens without her. None of this happens without Dr. Spirko.
It's just incredible. She's like, like the family member that gets everybody together for the holiday gathering.
I mean, I'm not here to speak for Doug or Crystal or Zach. I'll just say, from my perspective, if it's not for Dr. Spirko, none of this is where it is.
Oh, she is awesome, and I cannot wait for the sequestration.
Look at Kinsey, the intern. Look at that.
Go away.
We're going to blow Kinsey up, too.
Yeah, so Kinsey, are you going to use your own channel? Because I'll have to find it. But guys, we have Kinsey, the intern. I don't know if she's going to grow a YouTube channel on her own, but that is her name. So
Kinsey, the intern.
You might see an update in the description of this video after I go and figure that out, and we can follow her, help her grow. Can you let us know? I heard, because I watched Katie Spirko announce it, but can you describe season 2?
So as it stands, Dr. Spirko has identified a whole. This case got us to looking at this myriad of connections and other very strange cases in West Tennessee. Women disappearing without a trace. Some other convictions that seem a little bit like this, where a case got closed, but in a way that just doesn't look right. Yes, if you listen to our podcast, not only is Kinsey the intern an incredibly talented presenter, she also sings.
Yeah, very cool.
So, but season 2 that we have in mind is to keep looking in West Tennessee for other cold cases, missing persons, wrongful convictions, and just looking at all kinds of other shenanigans and weird stuff that's happened out in West Tennessee over the last few decades, and seeing if there's some connections and through lines that we can pull on, and some more back roads we can ride, and see. Dana is being too vague. I'm Yeah, it's a teaser. So, um,
I mean, you
season
guys are great with
two,
naming. Trial and
season
Error is a
two,
great name.
out
Unsolved.
and season two, we will continue to explore the possibility that that there is more to Terry Britt's criminal history than has so far emerged, including the possibility that that there are um, well, there it is. Season two, Terry Britt is a serial killer. A theory in progress, a theory that we are currently exploring.
Are we saying allegedly?
Allegedly, um, allegedly. Um, so there are some dots that we're going to see how they connect or if we can connect them. So, um,
Uh,
do I have my own channel? Nope. Nope.
you had an old podcast.
I did about 20 episodes or so where I interviewed lawyers and judges and stuff like that. If you like that, that's what did I call that? Ready for trial. So
There you go.
if you
I
just
couldn't
can't get
remember, so
enough
I'm
of
glad
me,
you did.
you can go listen to Ready for Trial. There's about 20 episodes out there.
Or you can look up the Hot Crazy Matrix.
Oh Lord.
Will you do one for Janet Britt?
Hot crazy.
Will you plot her? Will you plot some of the characters?
Listen. You just outed me. Um Watch what happens next.
Sweet.
People may have watched this whole 3.5 hours and not realized that I was internet famous once.
But this is why you're so good at connecting dots and explaining what makes sense and what doesn't. I do also want to big thank you to Take It to Trial. I know she'd gotten out of here already. She'd gifted these 10 memberships, but I believe you are going to be doing a collab with Take It to Trial. So her channel link should be in the description of this video. But I wanted to shout out, especially for your audience. Do you know when you're going to be on with Take It to Trial?
Don't know,
or any
working that
others that you
out.
want to? Okay. So guys, everybody's got to keep an eye on the ball. And if you guys don't know about community posts, I'm sure your intern will figure it out for you. But you can alert people ahead of time that you're going to be on someone else's channel. So, because I think Docket Decoder you might have another collab with, Defense Diaries. So guys, these are other channels that are also looking into this case. If you're looking for more places, there's tons on my own channel. Go down the rabbit hole. But if you're looking to get this case out there, if you want to see other channels that are covering it, and I think you're going to do the rounds with a lot of them. So
yeah,
go out there, follow these channels. Miss Janet Demeanor, another channel. Miss Demeanor is the fun part of the name. I'm putting the Janet there so you can search
like
her
that.
and distinguish her from Janet Britt. It's good Janet and bad Janet, just like we have a good Jennifer and a bad Jennifer. And yeah, anywhere you see, you guys can always let me know if you see other channels covering this case. I'll shout them out as well. Because the more eyes, the more chats we go fill up, the more YouTube will spill this into other people's feeds, and
and we're just trying
to
draw attention to this wrong. Absolutely happy to do Defense Diaries. Sure.
And I love this. So Natalie says, I have to say your podcast is probably the best I've ever watched. It made me look at things all different. I'm a bit weary of the salacious true crime. There's true crime means a lot of things, but there's a subgenre I think of true crime where it's just like almost a bit too shock, awe. It doesn't seem I don't learn much from it. It just pulls at my heartstrings and things seem very emotional, but I don't really feel like I'm getting information in the storyline and the details that show who's supposed to have done something.
Yeah.
And your podcast, you guys have delivered the exact opposite of that. I'm assuming that comes from both of your professional backgrounds and you guys have access to information, but you guys had to present that in a way that's meaningful. And you did a great job on every issue that you've covered.
Well, thank you. It's daunting to tackle something of this magnitude and try to do it justice, and tell a story in a coherent way, particularly one as complicated as this. So thank you.
Well, I love it. And I see Miss Janet Demeanor is back in the building. So I think she did a whole stream, talked about Zachary Adams a little bit and made it back here because we've been on for 3 hours. If you want, it's totally up to you. I'm going to do my thank yous for a few of the gifted memberships and super chats, and I can free you. I think I can end your live, or you guys can do it from your end on YouTube. Or if you just
Go
want me to
ahead.
sit here and stare at people. Yeah? Kick you off?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to go
All right,
eat.
guys, everybody show a ton of love to Trial and Error Podcast. If you're watching with me, make sure you go over there after the stream and hit the like button, watch all of their videos. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing whether you do more content, this podcast, a different topic, or you're bouncing around with other collaborations. Looking forward to the next one. Thank you,
Very
thank you,
good.
thank you.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.